Testing?
Welcome, everyone, to the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of, what's the date? Wednesday, May 17th, 2023. And we're a committee of the CVRD board that makes recommendations on issues related to land use and the delivery of local government services in electoral areas. So it's a pretty important committee to us. And we respectfully acknowledge that we live and work on the traditional and unceded territories of the Coast Salish and New Chalmouth people. We offer our gratitude to the First Nations for their care of the earth and their teachings about our earth. And we're able to respectfully take those into consideration when we make our decisions for the future of our community. And I would like to add that I am very excited to say that, and you probably have heard, that Cowichan tribes in the province have just signed a government-to-government agreement to develop a water sustainability plan for the Cook-Silo watershed. So it's going to be certainly a very important initiative, but also a huge learning opportunity for understanding better how to bring Cowichan teachings into our work. The other thing I'd like to say is when I was driving in, I heard on the radio that it is Museum Week, and people should think about museums and visit museums, and I do think it's really important to understand our history so that we can move forward in a better way into the future. So yeah, it's pretty interesting topic. So we should move now to the agenda, and I think there's some changes to the agenda. Ms.
Yes.
Mohan.
Thank you, Chair Nicholson. So there's a number of changes to today's agenda. The first item is to note that item R10 is being deleted from the agenda. This is significant perhaps to some attendees in the gallery because public input period, which is restricted to items that are on the agenda, will no longer include commentary around R10 if that's what you came today to do. So R10 is removed. Additionally, there has been some supplemental information items received for R1 and R2 on the agenda. So we are adding them as new business, NB1, NB2, and NB3, and I'll read out the motion when we get there. And so what's been recommended to me is that we bring those supplemental items forward when we discuss those applications. So, and then as an NB4, there's been a request from Director Morrison to add Little Beach Grand Opening as a new business item.
Good.
And then the chair has requested that, time permitting, there be NB5, which is a roundtable. So 5 new business items and 1 deletion. So the motion reads that the agenda be amended with a deletion of item R10, which is a report from the Parks and Trails Division regarding Shawnigan Lake Waterfront Park's schematic design brief and boat launch feasibility study, and the addition of 5 new business items, NB1, which is supplemental information received from Andy Stewart regarding item R1, application number ALR 23B1, which is 4045 Hillbank Road, PID 009470557. NB2, which is supplemental information received from Mark Chornopsky and Irene Predicant, re item R2, application number DVP 23D01 4598 Sparwood Road. NB3 is supplemental information received from Mike Martin regarding item R2, application number DVP 23D01 4598 Sparwood Road, and that the NB4 Little Beach Grand Opening and NB5 Roundtable, that they all be that the agenda be amended and approved as noted.
Great. I have a mover and a seconder. Oh, we have a question.
So some of these items, I don't know what they are, but for sure Andy Stewart's, should that be a new business item? It seems like that's at the end of the.
Well, we'll bring it up at the
bring it up.
time of-
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Sorry, misunderstood. Thanks.
Okay.
So moved.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Minutes.
Yes, the next item on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes from the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of May 3rd, 2023.
Do I have a mover? Any omissions or changes? Do I have a mover? And a seconder? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
There doesn't appear to be any business arising from the minutes, and so then we're on to public input period.
Do we have anyone in the virtual space for that?
No, we don't have
No.
anybody in the virtual space.
So please come up to the microphone, state your name, and provide your input. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. I squeal. My name is Kim Bernard, Area B, Shawnigan Lake, Shawelican, and I gratefully would like to acknowledge that this is Local Government Awareness Week. And particularly today is in honor of asset management, and one of that is to sustainable service delivery. And I would like to offer our engaged community volunteers as living proof of that, and the collaborations that we can enjoy here between government services and boots on the ground in the community. And so I'd like to speak to R12 and R13, and particularly celebrate one of the biggest events our community enjoyed so far this year in our use of the Parks and Trails permit application. And I have a token and acknowledgement of appreciation for our area director, Sierra Acton, because she helped us with our public engagement to get the word out, and she herself participated in the cleanup. So I'd like to pass this over to Sierra. Thank you, Sierra. So just to wrap up, I really believe in community engagement and volunteering, and I think that we can all be of influence. And so with gratitude, we just acknowledge that our parks play a big role in this under R12 and R13, and we'd like to see more of that, getting people out in nature and doing good for the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bernard. Anyone else?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and fellow directors. I would like to speak to R5. I'm Susan Kaufman from Salem. I'm very concerned that the proposed development services modernization and development procedures and referral process are forging ahead prior to the MOCP and zoning bylaw. Bylaw 4483 appears to jump over the public process for the modernization and is part of an incremental silencing of the public's voice. I'm particularly concerned with the idea that a 20% setback to streams, wetlands, and watercourses is considered minor. The local and provincial government approve these reductions, but do not provide regulation or policy for permanent markings of the setbacks or enforcement post the issuance of a DPA and subsequent sale of a property. It is then up to the public to report infractions. I have not seen any real changes to this document that would reflect input from the public and the EA directors at the May 3rd meeting. Looking at an item on this agenda and previous applications, I'm left to wonder how requested input from the public is incorporated into the staff reports. The CVRD needs to develop policy that addresses short-term rentals, this is on to another topic, that otherwise will not necessarily provide the long-term attainable housing that is desired. I remain very concerned that the proposed changes offer the greatest benefit to the staff, applicants, and developers, while not protecting members of our communities that have invested in their properties and that are reflective of the OCP and zoning bylaws under which they made those investments. I respectfully ask that you defer adopting this bylaw until after the MOC and zoning bylaw modernization process is complete. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. On R5, on the modernization 4483, I see that the CVRD wants to go virtual as much as possible. And I would like to see the CVRD go back to personal meetings, because we're getting to have a lot of elderly people like hermits now, and it's good for them to get out to these meetings. Socially, they see their directors, and I just think that we don't need to have an elaborate hearing with coffee and tea and cookies and goodies. You can make them without all that stuff, and at least we'll have some eye-to-eye contact, and the people will get out and socialize. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Cliff. Anyone else? Okay, on to,
The rest of the agenda. So
rest of the
there are no delegations today, and there's not any correspondence outside of what was received as additional information and added as new business. So we're on to item 7, which is information, and there's an information item which is Electoral Area C, Cobble Hill Advisory Planning Commission minutes of May 4th, 2023.
it's been moved?
I think it's just for
Yeah,
information.
oh, right, it's been,
Yeah.
that's for information.
Yeah.
Anyone have any questions? All right, let's move on.
All right, and so now we're on to reports. So the first report, R1, is from the Development Services Division regarding application number ALR 23B014045 Hillbank Road, PID 009470557.
Welcome, Mr. Buchan.
Not seeing the slides on the computer here, so I'll just go off the scripts. This is an application for a non-farm use regarding the placement of fill for the property at 4045 Hillbank Road. The purpose of this application is to allow up to 18,000 cubic meters of salvaged soil resources to be placed on the property. The application notes that the proposal would allow salvaged soil to be processed on-site to remove rock and other coarse fragments so that it can be blended with compost and spread on the fields of the subject property. The agent has provided a letter of rationale included with the report as attachment C, detailing the merits of this proposal. The agent indicates that this application is in response to ALC file CE 197704. Staff have confirmed that this is an ALC compliance and enforcement file regarding fill that has been deposited onto the property without ALC approvals. The location of the soil is shown on one of the attached maps. And next slide, please.
Just hang on a sec, can we make this bigger?
So on the attached map, you can see the, sorry,
It's coming, hang on.
in yellow, it shows the location of the current imported soils.
Okay,
And next slide, please. Staff are recommending that the application be forwarded to external agencies for additional information, comment, and feedback prior to the board deciding on whether or not it will advance its application to the Agricultural Land Commission for a final decision. Staff have also recommended that the board seek additional information from the applicant. As noted earlier in the meeting, feedback was received by a member of the public who raised concerns about the proposal. Staff are suggesting that the Ministry of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation be added to the list of referral agencies. And just pointing out a quick typo in the report is that it says the board may forward this to the Area E APC. This should read Area B APC, but the board can certainly do both a joint Area B and Area E APC meeting. I'm here for questions if you have them.
Thank you, Mr. Buchan. Any questions for Director Abbott?
Thank you, Chair. I'm concerned about learning more. Well, I'd like to learn more about where the imported fill is coming from. It talks about a gravel pit. I can't imagine how much organic matter you're going to get out of a decommissioned gravel pit. And the report goes on and on about how they'll use an agrologist to talk about the distribution of the soil on the subject property, which there may be some question as to the street address, but not a whole lot of information is provided as to where the source material is coming from.
Thank you. I should note that the applicant's agent is not here today, and that if this application does proceed to external agencies, they'll be back at a future ESC meeting to answer questions. The application does note that this is coming from an adjacent property to the south, but more information could certainly be requested on that.
Other questions? Director Wilson?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I think Director Abbott, Abbott has already brought up one of the points that is going on here. In this particular case, just clarify something for me. We're referring to the external agencies. At any point during this application, will there be any kind of public hearing or information?
Typically, with an ALC application, there isn't a public hearing.
Okay.
The board could refer this to an APC, which is intended to be the voice of the public in the electoral area, so that is an opportunity should the board wish.
Okay, and that's one of the things that I would probably ask for in the future. Thank you.
Director Atkin?
Yeah, thank you. These ALC applications are always kind of very challenging. Thank you. So I'm trying to understand how our decision today, what will it look like in the future? So how things will play out. And and it's always a challenge to understand what the ALC is actually going to do on their side as well. So we've heard from them, but I still don't really have a good idea of how they conduct their own business. And this is just a challenge given to us by the province. I'm trying to understand the difference of our options. What would happen with option one versus, so we would get all the reports and then would come back again kind of thing, and then option two, and then option three. I think as far as the community goes, the community is really challenged with these types of behaviors and kind of lost their patience a little bit. So understanding, what happens if option three was passed today.
Thank you. So for option one, sending this out to external agencies, we would come back to in a future ESC meeting with the feedback from other agencies as well as from the applicant. And then it would be a similar meeting to today. Option two, which is to send this to the commission with comments and recommendations, and attachment A speaks to what some of those optional comments and recommendations could be, would mean that we send this to the ALC and they would provide a final decision. Option three is to send it without comments, which is an option available to local government, which is simply to take the application, send it to the ALC and have them make it the final decision. We don't have an ability to approve this without the ALC, but we do have an ability to say no and deny an application, which is option number four. In the reports, there's a reference to information bulletin from the ALC, bulletin number 07. That's a 15-page bulletin that speaks to how they consider these types of applications. And for soil and fill, they do consider things like, will the placement of soil and fill aid the farming activity? Is it going to reduce the agricultural capability of the land? So the ALC does consider those factors, but that's outside of our scope for this meeting, because that happens if we forward it along.
I guess I'll follow up. It's just unfortunate that these kinds of enforcement issues happen, and we're the ones stuck spending money on it, time, energy, staff time. But, so, I'm happy to hear, would like to hear from everyone else, but with a rational mind, I think the staff recommendation is a good one to get more information and to refer it to the APC. And then this also highlights that maybe one day we might have an agricultural commission that looks at these kind of things too, as far as the voice from the public. So anyway, thank you.
Director Wilson, but can I just ask a quick question? What if kind of agricultural activity is occurring at this place?
We could certainly ask more information from the applicants to speak to the existing agricultural capacity and what's going on. It looks from the air photos that there's some hay fields, but I can't speak to more beyond that because it was not provided in the application.
Thank you. Director Wilson?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. There's some good points being brought up here because there is a certain amount of, for want of a better word, confusion as to what's actually going on here. One of the things that I have real concerns about, and I'm going to be very careful what I say so I don't upset people, is the reliance on the professional reliance model, which is what we're looking at here with a qualified professional agrologist. Is there anything in there that would allow for a peer review of those of his reports?
Not that I'm aware of, but that's certainly something that staff could investigate if the board advances this to other agencies for comment, and we'd include that as part of the package that comes back to the board.
Yeah, thank you. And follow up, please, Madam Chair. And I'm sure you can understand, but there have been instances, and we've seen it in the newspapers, etc., where reliance on the professional reliance model has not worked. And this is why I would like to see, if at all possible, and it's not meant as any reflection on who's doing this stuff, I would like to see a peer review if at all possible. Thank you.
Director McClinton?
Yeah, I'd like to just make a comment. You know, I think it's tough for us city folks to be sitting here sort of, you know, judging what a farmer does and needs to do. And I think it's appropriate to send this to the referral agencies to understand, you know, if this is what the rationale makes sense. It's being requested to help grow more crops on the farm, and I mean, if that's true, I think that we should be supporting our farmers. But so I mean, I would personally be in support of option one, but you know, I'd like to hear what possibly the only farmer on our board has to say.
Director Martman?
Thank you for that, Director McClinton. For the referral. The question I have is I'm trying to understand the application from a perspective of what's been done already and what's going to be proposed to be done. Because I'm reading that there's a total fill placement of about 1,800 square meters. But some of that's already there, or is that all of it there already? And so maybe explain that a little bit better. Thanks.
That information isn't present in the application, so we know that the request is for 18,000 cubic meters. I don't know how much of that is currently on the land. We just know that that is the request. We could ask for that information from the applicant.
And so the follow-up is though, but there's indication that there is something there already because they're not in compliance with the ALC regulation. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, this was in response to an ALC compliant enforcement file, okay. So there is fill that has been brought onto the property.
Can I ask a question? Did the ALC request that he put in an application?
I couldn't speculate on that because I don't know the
You
answer to it.
don't know the answer? That's fine.
It's certainly an option to make an application to see if they can get approval. And if they don't, then it would go back to the ALC for enforcement action.
Director Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. More in support of the director for the area in that there's a lot of moving parts in this. And staff have provided us with 4 options. And I look at this as it's soil deposit, it's soil remediation. There's all sorts of activities that will be considered to be part of this, and this seems, it's the early fact gathering time and information and referral gathering time. So, you know, I wasn't expecting to come here to be making a final decision and sit here thinking that our staff have recommended option 1. The director for the area seems to be supportive of that, and I think that's probably a sort of a good first stage move for us to recommend to the board. Thank you.
Director Martman, before.
So in your recommendation in front of us, it talks about referrals, and I'm wondering, do you see an advantage or the ability for the ALC to provide information on this file, or is that part of what option 1 is?
So typically, with an ALC application, it comes to the local government first before the ALC reviews. And once we've completed our portion, if we choose to advance it, then the ALC would take a look at the application. They probably wouldn't respond to a request to do a referral on an application. They're going to see if we approve it.
So just to clarify, so I wasn't asking them to weigh in on this application. I was wondering if there's a file already established for this property with the ALC and whether that information might be available.
The file that exists today with us is the file for this application, and it exists both with the ALC and with us. We could get more information about that application and provide it to the board with the next report that comes forward.
Okay.
But the application is made through the ALC, and it comes to local government first for basically a referral before it starts to the ALC staff.
And so there is an indication that ALC has a file of non-compliance or a compliance issue?
That is
That's the
correct.
one, that's where I was wondering if that information would be available to the committee.
We can certainly follow up with the ALC and see if that's available.
And how do we structure that in the motion? So, thank you.
We'll figure that out. Director Acton.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so there's been some good questions here, and I'm wondering, will you take those questions into consideration, fill in any of that information that's not in this application, and have that available before referring it out, particularly like the APC, to have more, because we're kind of stumped with this little information as well, so wondering how you'll do it.
If the direction is to send this to external agencies for comments, including details on enforcement and compliance, we could get that information together prior to coming to an APC.
And would it be okay with you, Director Acton, if it went to the Area E APC too? Maybe they could have a joint meeting if that's easier, I don't know. Yeah, okay. Okay, so are we ready? Director Acton, would you like to make the motion? Oh, just hang on.
Just before you make a motion, I just wanted to remind, in case it wasn't evident, that we had a supplemental information item received for R1 that's part of new business. I think people have been making reference to it,
Yep.
but I just wanted, that this was going to be our opportunity to bring that forward if need be, so before you make your motion. So.
Yep, I think it's really relevant. So that would be part of the information, would be verified and included in whatever package.
Correct, as well as at the extra referral agencies.
Great.
Yep,
All right, so-
move option 1 with all the extra information.
And referral to the Ministry of Mines as well as to the APCs with all the information. And it's seconded. Any more discussion? Any more discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. R2. Welcome, Ms. Boyle.
R2. So R2 is a report from the Development Services Division regarding application number DVP 23D014598 Sparwood Road, PID 029043107. And I believe we have an applicant in the lobby, is that right? Okay.
Yes, and there's the applicants, the property owners are also here in person.
Just give me a second here. So maybe we can just do a test. It's Mr. Alan Cox, I think, that's joining us. Is
Yes.
that right? So I see him appearing in the meeting, but maybe he can confirm whether he can hear us and whether we can hear him.
Yes, Alan Cox and Joe Kinraid here. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before you is an application for a variance application for the property 4598 Sparwood Road, which will ultimately allow for 3-lot conventional subdivision. The property is located at the intersection of Sparwood Road and Lanes Road in Cowichan Bay. The applicants are proposing to subdivide the property into 3 lots, which will shift the front parcel line from Sparwood Road to Lanes Road for Lot A and proposed REM Lot 1. Subdivision must not create any non-compliance with the zoning bylaw, which is hence their application for a development variance permit. The following variances are requested: to reduce the front parcel line setback from 7.5 meters to 4.5 meters for an existing garage and future residential construction on proposed Lot A, to reduce the front parcel line setback from 7.5 meters to 4.5 meters for the existing single-family dwelling on REM Lot 1, to increase the accessory building floor area from 25 square meters to 67 square meters to allow for the accessory building to remain on Lot A after subdivision, and to reduce the watercourse setback from 15 meters to 11.7 meters for an existing residential accessory building, the pool shed on the plan. So this slide here shows the existing property and the proposed new lots. The report provides a planning analysis of zoning, environmental, natural hazard, and development permit considerations. Overall, staff consider the request for the variance to be reasonable. The buildings have existed on the property for several years without concern, and staff do not consider the proposed variance to the front parcel lines to negatively impact the community, nor pose any hazard risk or negative environmental impacts. So the recommendation is there before you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Would the applicants like to add anything?
No, that's fine, thank you.
All right. Any questions? Director
Sure.
Abbott.
Ms. Boyle, this has been an application in the process for some time, but we've had quite a bit of community, I guess it's a variance, so it doesn't, typically, it doesn't need to go to other agencies, but I think community members have expressed some concerns, and was there any notion of bringing this before the Area Planning Commission?
I myself had no intention of bringing it before the Advisory Planning Commission because that's not really our standard procedure for variances, but you can always recommend that as a director.
Supplemental, given the number of variances and encroachments on water courses, the sensitivity to oceanfront neighbors and community concerns, I would like to see this referred to the APC, the Area D APC.
And I would draw the committee's attention to the two new business items that were related to this application. Director Atkin, do you have a question?
Thank you. But my understanding of this is pretty simple application. The variances are just buildings that are already there. So this is like, it really appears to be a well-thought-out application, and I don't think that it's necessary to go to the APC unless we're looking at removing buildings that are already there.
Should we turn to the director of the area to make a motion, if you'd like to?
I would move that this be sent back this be referred back to the Area D APC for reasons that buildings have arrived since 2017, pools have been built. So lots of things have happened to that property in the intervening years. I do realize that it's a long time, but in light of community concern, I think the purpose of an APC is to hear feedback from the neighbors and community, and this is an ideal opportunity to make that available.
I have a seconder on the motion. Would you like to speak to it, Director McClinton? Oh, okay, it's seconded. Would you like to speak to it? Yes.
So can staff weigh in on this for a second?
Certainly.
So you say it's unusual, but it's not, it is permitted. I'm curious on the process that would be followed if for the applicants, if there's an issue with getting approval, do they have other options?
Well, we cannot approve, through Director Martin, to Director Martin through the chair. CVRD, we can't approve a subdivision application unless it meets our zoning bylaws. So that's the request for the variance, because these buildings exist. Any subdivision of this property will change the front parcel lines, and they will be too close. Right now, the garage and house have been constructed totally legally. They applied for development permits for both, for the existing buildings. And I should mention that part of the reason those buildings are set so close to the exterior parcel line was because they wanted to be sited farther away from the water course for protection reasons and for, to minimize hazard risk. In terms of process, if this application was referred back to staff, we would set up an advisory planning commission meeting for Area D, and they would provide community input. I would then take that input along with all the information received and make a recommendation. It could be the same, it could be different. I can't predict what my recommendation would be in the future.
Director Morrison.
So thank you. Ms. Boyle, very well-written report. I felt comfortable with, based on the information that was provided today, to come to make a decision. I just want to clarify something that is kind of a core tenet of why we refer things to advisory planning commissions. It's not for them to receive input from the public. They don't participate in our advisory planning commission meetings. There are representative sample of community, and there isn't the opportunity for participation in the APC meeting or to make delegation presentations. That's not what an APC meeting is for. So I'm looking at the fact that this is a fairly technical thing based on buildings that are in place, and the nature of the variances are fairly well laid out in this report. So is this if there's more public input to come, it should come to here. It should come to us and to you as the director, not through your APC. So I don't think if that's what the intent was, is to funnel more community concerns and input through your APC, that's not the right place to go. It should come here. So I won't be supporting the referral to the APC. Thank you.
For clarity, Chair, how do we get that neighborhood community feedback?
What you would get is feedback, as Director Morrison mentioned, feedback from your APC commission members on their thoughts on the variance requests.
But there's a recommendation that this not proceed to an APC, so I see
you move that it should.
I know, but it doesn't sound like certain directors feel that this is warranted because we've got all the information we need, and I maintain that we don't. We're getting feedback quite vociferously that the community, the neighbors, the most impacted want a say, and if I don't hear it, if we don't refer to the APC, when will they get a chance to speak?
Well, so people will have, it will come back to the EASC, and at that time, there's an opportunity for more public input on it. And you will also, in addition, have the APC members' thoughts on the variance request. So there would be more, it does provide an opportunity for more public input.
Assuming the APC, my motion to refer this back to
Yes.
the passes.
Director Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I will be supporting this for a very simple reason. If I have any doubts, I'm no expert in this, but I know for a fact that members of my APC are very, very good on what they know about the building codes, the bylaws and everything else. And some of the advice that I hear at those are well worth listening to. So in this particular case, if I have any doubt about an application in my area at all, as Director Abbott has, I would ask the same thing, that we get some feedback from the APCs. In this case, I will be supporting this one. Thank you.
Director Martman.
Thank you. And, these are, I think I always learn more every time I come here, but I'd like to just mention something that I learned from this group last term. And that was, I struggled with an application and I wasn't sure what to do. And it was a development variance permit, and this group actually assisted me in saying, well, let's get it to your APC and you can learn some more. And I think it's, again, about gathering more information. I think that's what you're looking for. And so it did help me. It helped me work through that process as in decision making. So as much as I do tend to support what directors are saying, that I came prepared to make a decision, I am also willing to support gathering a bit more information, understanding the limitations of an APC as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Martman. McClinton.
That's all right. Just a quick question, through the chair. How quickly can we get the APC organized and get the information back?
Thank you through the chair to Director McClinton. I can't make any guarantees. I would work as fast as possible, but it depends on our administrative capacity and the availability of APC members, which can be varied because they are volunteers. So.
Through the chair, I'll try asking that a different way. Maybe just a rough ballpark. Are we talking weeks, months, years?
Hopefully not years.
Through the chair to Director McClinton, I also just want to point out or clarify that, so let's say it went to the APC in June, we would also need to redistribute the public notice within the time frame that's required in the Local Government Act, and so it would possibly be in July or September that it would be coming back to EASC.
I believe that the applicants or the property owners in the room would like to speak. I don't know when the appropriate time for that is.
I asked them and they said that they didn't.
They didn't want to.
And we're into our discussion now, so I don't really feel it's appropriate. Anyone else like to make comments? All right, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? The motion's carried. R3. Yeah, we'll do another one or two.
Okay, R3 is a report from the Development Services Division regarding application number RZ23G01 11224 Chemainus Road, PID 003067-327, and I believe the applicant's in the lobby, and I will be letting them in.
All right, welcome back, Chloe.
I just want to check. I can see Ms. Irwin. Can you just test your audio so we know that we can hear you?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Presented before you is a zoning amendment application for the property 1124 Chemainus Road in Saltaire. The property fronts Chemainus Road to the northeast and backs onto the railway right-of-way. Currently, a single-family dwelling constructed in 1973 is used as the principal residence and is located on the southern portion of the property, and a lawfully non-conforming dwelling is located on the northern portion of the property, which was constructed in the 1950s. In my staff report, there's a summary of the relevant procedures, OCP policies, and zoning bylaw regulations. Staff consider the proposed zoning amendment to meet the above noted OCP policies. The OCP in particular notes that the rural character of the property of Saltaire should be preserved, and as the dwelling is already in existence, staff do not consider the proposed zoning amendment to negatively impact the rural character of the community. So the recommendation is before you on the next slide, I think. And I'm here for questions, and so is the applicant.
Would the applicant like to add anything? Ms. Irwin?
I'm not sure I can add a lot. I think the only thing that came up when I was reviewing the report was just to emphasize that the accessory dwelling unit that I have is, as Chloe points out, it is it's lawfully non-conforming as it stands, so it's usable, but without the rezoning, I can't really make any alterations to it or upgrade it or make it more usable for family members or caregivers. So I just, sorry, I feel like I'm coming in late, but I think it was mentioned that I have a daughter who's 18. She's moving towards adulthood, but she requires 24-hour care. She's disabled and medically complex. So I have a whole team of caregivers, and I'd like to keep my daughter living with me on my property, whether in the main home or in the accessory dwelling unit that I have. And but I can't really do anything with it under my current zoning. So that's why I'm seeking a rezoning to R2A, so that I could potentially get a permit to make alterations. So yeah, I just wanted to clarify that point.
Thank you. Any questions for staff or Ms. Irwin? Director Martman.
So I believe most of us have received correspondence on this about that we've seen, some of us seen this similar application before, and wondering about the requirement for an OCP amendment. Can you speak to that?
Thank you. Through the chair to Director Martman. So staff interpret the OCP policies to support this application. There is one sentence in the official community plan in the suburban residential local area plan designation that speaks to allowing for a second dwelling on a particular property with a specific PID. Staff interpret this as an enabling statement for that property and not as a restriction for all other properties. So this zoning bylaw, in our interpretation, would not be in contravention of the official community plan, so we would be permitted to adopt it.
Any other questions? Director Atkin.
The only thing, I don't know Saltaire that well. Does the community have concerns around units becoming Airbnbs in this area?
Through the chair to Director Acton, I personally don't know if the community has concerns. I mean, I think broadly speaking, based on some of the other initiatives that are going on at the CBRD, mainly the economic development strategy, affordable housing, I know there are community concerns broadly about Airbnb, but I don't know particularly about Saltaire.
Yep. So to me, that would be the only, one of the strongest concerns. Because, you know, we used to hear a lot from Director Yanni DiNardo, you know, we zone the property, not the person. So the property gets zoned, and then my concern would be that it would be taken out of affordable housing or for a caregiver, as mentioned, or a nurse or her daughter. So, yeah, that's it.
I'm going to turn to the director of the area. What would you like to do?
Through the, excuse me, through the chair, thank you. Hopefully maybe just give me a little latitude. I do have a question at the end. I do just first want to say hi to Val. Val and I met when I was campaigning before I had decided to run, and hearing about her situation and the fact that her application was not approved the last go around. I don't know much about that whole process, but it was certainly something that motivated me. It felt like, you know, I don't know if an injustice is too strong of a word, but it didn't sit with me very, very well. You know, as she mentioned, her daughter is disabled and has special needs. And actually, Val, I've asked her, has given me permission to talk about this at different times. You know, for that purpose alone, I think it's right and reasonable. But the other part is this cottage was built in the 50s. It's legal, non-conforming. It's there. You know, to bring it under the purview of the CVRD and bring it up to code and compliance, I think is absolutely the thing we should be doing with properties of this nature. The other thing I can say for sure is there's absolutely widespread support for Val and this application. There was quite a bit of outrage that it wasn't able to go through. You know, large community support. So, you know, I hope that you'll sort of take those words and as you're thinking about which way to vote. So my question, which I've forgotten now, give me 1 second. Gosh, I can't believe that. Oh, there it is. So I personally would like to move this through as quickly as possible without a public hearing, and I'm just not sure what I recommend. So is it that it be recommended to the board? Is that like a 2-part recommendation, or is it a 1 and a 2? Yeah. What? Say that again. Oh no, I would like to have it go through and be approved as quickly as possible.
I believe the two, sorry, I don't have the staff report right in front of me, but I believe the 2 recommendations are to start drafting the zoning bylaws immediately and to proceed without a public hearing. So it would go straight to first and second reading, and we would do the public notice right away, and then would have no public hearing, which would be the fastest process.
Through the chair,
Yes.
would like to move that.
Do I have a seconder? I have a seconder. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll fully support this, and I just want to remind everyone that if, you know, we shouldn't forget that we're in a housing crisis. And I attended an event the other day. There was one yesterday about, which I didn't go to, and maybe some of our colleagues did, about fast tracking the increase in inventory. And while this is in existence, this is exactly the kind of thing that we can do. And with the director for the area's desire to expedite this, I think we have to be looking at every application that comes before us with that mindset that we need to be proceeding to create the inventory because the demand is outstripping the supply that we've been producing over years, and we really have to step it up. So I fully support the resolution. Thank you.
Other comments, Director Martman?
And maybe also a question. I think I don't have a problem supporting this. I appreciate the explanation of the OCP because I think that came up before. But I also recognize Director Acton's point, and I was wondering, is there any limitations on short-term rentals in this area for the zoning, or is it something that a covenant could be explored?
Through the chair to Director Martman. So I don't have all of the zoning bylaws memorized, but I do know that in most of them, short-term vacation rental for suites is not permitted. It's only bed and breakfast use, which is really specific. It usually is 2 to 3 rooms, and the owner has to live there. It has to be within the principal dwelling. So that speaks to the zoning question. In terms of a covenant, that is something, if the board wishes to consider, that staff could be directed to work on.
Yeah, I think if you already have it in the established bylaws, then that's fine. If it wasn't, I would be looking for something like that to protect the land and the use downstream. Thanks.
Director Wilson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do understand the concerns that Directors Acton and Markman have, but in this particular case, I'm not sure that a covenant is a good idea at all. This came forward before. I know the background fairly well. And in this particular case, again, I've used that phrase, we should fast track this, get it done. No covenants, no distractions, no diversions. Let's let this go forward as quickly as we can. And I would fully support what's going on here. Thank you.
Anyone else? Call a question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Thanks, Ms. Irwin. All right, let's take a 10-minute break. Welcome back, everyone. We're moving on to R4.
R4 is a report from the Development Services Division regarding community water system definition in CVRD Works and Servicing Bylaw number 4331 and Electoral Area H, North Oyster Diamond Zoning Bylaw number 1020.
And we have any staff here to speak to this? No. So I think this follows up from last. Oh, on land. Okay.
Hi.
Wait, I'm looking.
It's,
I'm looking. Oh,
Leonard Dubena.
Miss Dubena. Did I do it right?
Pretty close enough.
Please go ahead. Please
Okay.
go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry I couldn't attend in person today. So this report is to consider potential amendments to CVRD bylaw number 4331, the Works and Servicing bylaw, and the Electoral Area H zoning bylaw number 1020 in order to amend the definition of community water system. Sounds familiar, but the suggested amendments are prompted due to the forthcoming CVRD takeover of the Shell Beach water utility in Area H. And ideally, the utilities bylaws that are in association with the takeover would proceed at the same time as these suggested amendments, just to reduce inconsistencies. I can go through the recommended amendments, but they are before you on the slide. It's up to you. Yeah.
Well,
I'll
let's
stop
see if we
there.
have any questions. Is everyone okay, or would you like? I think Director Martman has a question.
So I've read through this, I understand it. How do things get so complicated? Because we have to hire experts to get through this. So that was just my only observation. It's a rhetorical question. No need to answer. Thank you.
Okay, would you?
I would move the recommendation as written. Thank you.
And it's seconded. Any more discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you.
R5 is a report from the General Manager of Land Use Services Department regarding development services modernization, development procedures, and referrals. This is an item referred from the May 10th, 2023 board meeting.
That's right. Welcome, Ms. Cheryl. We're going to have a good, deep discussion on this one, I think.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this report is, I guess, part two. Part one was received at the last Electoral Area Services Committee meeting. That was the information report on the Development Services Modernization Initiative that's been underway for several years now. In the report that you received on May 3rd, there was a proposed service enhancement plan for 2023-2025. And within that proposed plan were listed a number of internal policies and procedures that we were endeavoring to address and bring back to you. And so The report before you today addresses the development application procedures bylaw update and the development application referrals policy update, in addition to some recommendations around public hearings. If you'd like, I could provide more information now before further discussion, or I can take questions. What's your pleasure?
Why don't you prime the pump?
Okay, I will prime the pump. Okay, so in a nutshell, there are three kind of key components to the recommendation before you. One is an update to the development procedures bylaw. One is an update to the referrals policy, as I noted, and the third is around public hearings. So I'm actually I'll speak to the referrals policy first, because I think that's probably the most straightforward. The recommendation there is the update to some of the wording around what staff will do when they bring a report back to the Electoral Area Services Committee for the first time. And the current referrals policy states that staff will bring forward a report without a recommendation and essentially advise the committee on the options before you, but not to really provide any type of professional recommendation with respect to strong support or strong recommendation of denial. And we have had a number of internal discussions about that, and the planners are feeling that they want to present their views as professionals in certain cases, particularly where they're dealing with reports that are clearly not aligned with official community plans, and want to be able to come to this committee and to provide their opinion on the file. And of course, it's up to the committee what you want to do with it, but they want to be able to speak their minds. And I think that that is actually a very good thing. That is what we hire professionals for. And so that's what that amendment to the referrals policy would do, would be allow a little more flexibility to staff when they're coming before you. The procedures bylaw updates are, do you want to take
Yeah, maybe we should do questions as
Sure.
we go along.
Yeah, that might be.
Director Abbott.
If I may, Ms. Chair, I'm a little, you're going to come forth with just an opinion. How does an opinion versus a recommendation? Obviously, I infer that a recommendation that your staff provide is your opinion. I don't see how we're supposed to deliberate after we've heard all the opinions and come up with a recommendation?
Through you, Madam Chair, typically we're asking the committee to refer an application, and if you look at it in one regard, it almost seems as though if we're asking you to refer it, we're asking you to advance the application, and that inherently means that we support it, wherein we may not, right? And so the staff want to be able to say, our professional planning staff want to be able to say, we don't recommend that the file be referred, that we recommend that it not proceed. And these are the reasons why. I mean, you have to give every application that comes before you fulsome consideration, but you don't need to let applications proceed if you don't believe they should proceed.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Martman.
So I gather there's an overarching principle to these in that speed is of the essence, especially in today's environment. Do you see, my interest is where does speed involve in these different changes? Like, do you see to measure the outcome of that, the change? If you put these changes in place, do you see that things will be expedited? It's a very general question, but I'm just trying to put each of these categories into those areas of how it's going to impact things.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Director Martman, I think that's a really interesting question. The development application referrals policy hasn't been in effect for a very long time, but we've actually, I believe, seen it be very effective in helping to expedite applications. So we've changed our processes somewhat. They, rather than by default sending things to an advisory planning commission, there's typically a conversation with the electoral area director as to whether or not that is necessary. And in some cases, the applications can move much more quickly through the process. The change that I'm suggesting may also contribute to a more efficient process if it means, whether it means expediting an application, right? Not referring it and having it go straight to the board for readings without a public hearing, right? Or that an application be denied, meaning that, you know, it's not worthy of further time, really, and drawing staff resources and your resources unnecessarily. And I'll add that it also costs applicants money, right? The longer that an application is in stream and they're asked to do more and more, that can cost them more and more money. And sometimes an earlier no is a kind thing to do.
Director Wilson.
Hello, and thank you, Madam Chair. And one of the things that came up at public input period was the fact of, you know, there are going to be electronic meetings if we have a public hearing. And I understand the reasons for this with cost and ease of carrying this out. But there are going to be a lot of people who would be left out because they don't have access to that kind of thing. Is there any talk of perhaps trying to bring back the in-person meetings?
Madam Chair, would you like me to go on to talk about public hearings, or do you want to
maybe-
hold that?
Yeah.
Well, I
thought?
have just one question about the referrals, or the application referrals policy. Before we do that, is that all right? And Director Morrison does too? Would you like to go first?
My question's on what she was just talking about a moment ago. So.
Oh, okay. So my question is, when I look at the referrals policy, I question, you deem temporary use permits a minor application. And in my experience, temporary use permits have always been major in my area. So I am a little bit nervous about kind of getting too far down the road on temporary use permits without checking in with the community on those. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I could respond to that. So that is in the referrals policy now. I would say that there'll be, I think, a fairly fulsome opportunity to talk about temporary use permits in the near future. They're not widely accessible in the electoral areas now. We have fairly limited capabilities around issuance of temporary use permits
Except in my area,
at the current time.
So we need to get that, so this to me speaks like a modernization issue, maybe?
Yeah, the issue of temporary use permits definitely it falls under the realm of modernization of the official community plan and related policies and procedures. For the purposes of the referral policy, I'm not sure that we could make you could make a change to that, but if we got an application, we would have a conversation with the director about the course of action, whether that should be referred right away or not.
Yeah,
or
if
come
we
to-
did that as a matter of course, that would be fine.
Yeah.
Because, okay. Thank you. Carry on.
Madam Chair?
Oh, you'd like to go now?
Yes, please. So thank you for telling us that staff were dealing with some of the, they're almost unintended consequences around the preliminary report to committee. Thought it was a fantastic idea and it was going to streamline things and speed things up. And one of the unintended consequences with not having a full-throated recommendation from staff was got the sense that it was premature or almost incomplete. And I'm really encouraged that you've recognized that we do need that professional input, because I think one of the, again, the unintended consequences of we were reviewing them almost in the same frame that we were the original ones that were fully developed and all the material. So I just suggest that when we get that full recommendation, either deny or with changes or whatever, that we be reminded in the report, in the crafting of the report, that the other bits around the full report will be coming later, so that we don't get the sense that we need to add the extra bits in that will come later. Fair enough?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Director Morrison, that's fair enough.
Director Acton?
So we're just talking about the application referrals at the moment. So we've brought this up before, and I'm wondering if it's possible, because in Shawnigan Lake and along the Coxsila, so particularly the properties on the lake and the properties along the Coxsila, we are seeing, well, so this speaks to the variance part too. I'm seeing a lot of properties that probably shouldn't have been given variances, or should have, it was an opportunity to make things better, and it wasn't, that didn't happen.
So Director Acton, I think you're talking about something that we're coming to.
Okay, well, there's two. So the referral part, it would be really beneficial for Area B if all lakefront properties were referred to the Area B APC. And every time they catch things that the professionals didn't. A history about the foundation or anything. So I think there's only 650 civic addresses on Shawnigan Lake, and the opportunity to make things better only comes around every now and then. So would this be something that would be possible at this time? Could we have Area B excluded, or how would you suggest?
So, through you, Madam Chair, this is the board's policy, and so, and you constitute the voting members of the board on the policy, so it's your policy. If you want to refine the policy, change the policy, that is entirely within your purview. I would just ask that you, consider how that could potentially impact staff with respect to, we are trying to be somewhat consistent in how we treat applicants across electoral areas. But certainly where there are specific, environmental considerations, for instance, that would warrant that, then, that is something that we could look at. And other directors may have similar concerns. I'd be interested to hear that. And if the committee wants to see some, proposed language around referrals of certain type, then we could bring that back to you for consideration.
Right, I think this is sort of similar to the temporary use permit discussion. There are sensitivities in all the communities, and it's really important that the communication happens between when applications come in with the director, so that we can help manage the community input on those things. Carry on.
Well, I think if there is a possibility of changing some of the language, even variances. So, a variance on the lake where I could cite a few examples just from the last couple of years where they were permitted to renovate. The property is literally a meter from the lake when the water's low. They've built it to possibly get flooded. So I know we have the flood bylaw, but those these ones that I've witnessed didn't even come here. They just were allowed. So I think there should be a flag on all properties on the lake, so that we're moving towards making things better. So you want a development permit, you will have to remove that, little retaining wall that was built 80 years ago. So then we have the ability to make things better.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, I think some of the issues that Director Acton you're raising are things that really need to be vetted through the local area planning process. There's definitely a need for improved policies and guidelines around lakefront development, both for Shawnigan and for Cowichan. And so I hope that we will be working on that as we work through the official community plan and local area plan processes. With respect to the specific situations that you're noting, we receive development permit applications at the staff level, any variance permit applications and flood bylaw exemptions come here.
Well, these properties, you know, didn't, maybe because the existing use, they're allowed to just
It could
build,
also be
so-
unauthorized construction,
But, yeah.
which tends to happen.
But, I just don't think, I hear you, it's probably not the best tool to use because we have something coming, but it could be something in the meantime because we can't wait. Like, these opportunities only come along.
So,
Every now and then,
Director
so-
Acton, I want you to hold your thought.
Okay.
And, and let
you.
Ms. Cheryl continue
Yes.
down the road here, and then we can come back to that.
Shall I carry on to the bylaw?
Thank you.
Okay. So I've lost track of the number. 4,483 bylaws in the CBRD. That's a lot of bylaws. Okay, so the Development Services Review did recommend, you know, streamlining internal policies and procedures, trying to cut some of the red tape for applicants, and we're obviously recently getting a lot of information about the need to expedite housing across the province of BC. There were a number of legislative amendments that have occurred over the last couple of years to stimulate housing development, essentially. And just looking for my notes. Kind of three key areas. One was around, and to provide a little more flexibility. And so one was the option to not hold public hearings. And of course, public hearings incidentally have been around for almost 100 years now. But, and it's, you know, are debatable how sort of representative they are of, you know, your community and the democratic process. But that is being studied, and that aside, the legislature wanted to sort of reinforce that local governments have the option to not hold public hearings. The previous language said you have the option to waive a public hearing. Now they say you have the option to not hold a public hearing, but really they're saying, you know, where you're receiving an application that's consistent with your official community plan, you ought not to hold a public hearing. But of course, that is really up to you as a decision maker, and really for you to evaluate when an application comes before you, whether or not you want to have a public hearing and the form that will take. There were also changes around alternative public notice. So for a very, very long time, local governments have been required to publish notice in the local newspaper, 2 consecutive notices in advance of public hearing. And our legislation now allows notice to occur by alternative means of publishing. So you can, for instance, what is recommended here is that we could use the CBRD website and we could use subscriber lists, which are, I think, are fairly actively used. In addition to, I would recommend a convenience notice in the local papers. The nice thing about this option is that we can include all of the sort of technical verbiage we need to include in the alternative statutory notices, and in the newspaper we could actually use plain language and really simplify the information that we're putting forward, and maybe make a public hearing sound attractive. I'm not sure if that's possible, but so that's that sort of item in the legislation. And then the other was around delegation of authority for minor variances. And so the thinking here is that when minor variance applications come forward, things for instance, applications for minor adjustments to the height or siding or the size of buildings, that could be dealt with at the staff level and not kind of be forced to go through a big process all the way to the CBRD board. And so the legislation requires that if the local government wants to do that, that needs to be delegated via bylaw, which is what's proposed, and that there has to be guidelines or criteria for the types of variances that a delegate could consider. What staff are proposing is a number of different types of variances, but not more than 20% of deviation from the standard. So if it's a 3-meter setback to a property line, 20% of that would be 0.6 meters, and that would be the limit of a minor variance. Anything beyond that or closer to the property line would have to come here. And then the legislation requires that if a minor variance is considered, there has to be some guidelines, such as in what's proposed here is what our Board of Variance uses when they're considering hardship situations, and that's, would the proposed variance result in an appropriate development of the site, adverse impacts on the natural environment, ecosystems, or biodiversity, or adverse impacts the use and enjoyment of the subject property or adjacent land. And the legislation does not require that minor variances that are delegated that there be a notice to adjacent property owners. We're not recommending that. We're recommending that there still be a notice to adjacent property owners so they have the opportunity to provide comments and express if they would be affected by the proposed variance the same way that they are now. So I think those are the key changes. There was also a recent change to zoning regulations around cannabis, retail cannabis, and so there's a provision in the draft procedures bylaw to delegate authority to staff to require a public information meeting, essentially, if a license comes forward, and then just general bylaw maintenance.
Alrighty, Director Abbott has a question.
If I may, Chair, indulge me 3 points. Ms. Gerolf, the alternative public notice, you mentioned it, but when I first read it yesterday, I'm worried that we would move away from the print publication. I love the idea of plain speak notice, but it would be nice that it, excuse me, it would be nice that it's clearly indicated that there will be a public notice in our local paper. Excuse me. I'm antediluvian and I like papers. I like reading them, and I think a lot of people do. Going to the website is, it's not top of mind. Going to the mailbox, picking up a newspaper, and quickly flipping through. And as an aside, I think it also helps support community newspapers. It does get raised as a cost of doing business, but I think it's important that we get this information out, and if it can be in lay language, more power to it. The minor variances, I'm wondering, it sounds expeditious, which is great, probably cost saving, et cetera, but it would be nice to have a staff report on, these are all the minor variances that staff have approved, allowing the directors to possibly pull and say, we'd like to delve deeper into this particular one. And finally, utilizing more of the public information meetings versus public hearings. It came up today, probably even something as simple as a variance would allowances for more public information so that the public, there was some confusion about how things unfolded today, and I think our residents would like to know more about what's going on in their community. Thank you.
Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My view on the public hearing in person or versus online, and you're saying that certain circumstances we could have a public in-person one. I'm all for the electronic one. There's many other ways for people to give input, and the cost savings, the time savings, and I've actually had one rezoning in Area B this whole time in person, and 3 people showed up. Mr. Evans was one of them. So I don't think it's necessary. Maybe on specific controversial ones, we could give that option, but and then my second, I just dropped the the other topic that my other thought, I'll come back.
Director Morrison?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. COVID's done a lot to the way we do business, and I've been seeing a lot more desire amongst directors to have the public information meetings. And while we've done a fair number of the electronic public hearings, they are, in my view, quite restrictive as to who can participate. And well, we are in a housing crisis, and I know that our provincial regulations that have come forward have been very helpful to large municipalities that have to rent big halls and provide a whole bunch of staff. I just feel that we're losing touch with the people who are affected by rezonings. And I'm more inclined to say that we should be looking at the in-person public information, half-hour break, go into a public hearing as the default, as opposed to the electronic public hearing being the default. So given where we are and we're in a housing crisis, I can support some of this, but I think that we are probably going to have to move towards a more consistent policy of in-person public information, public hearing combinations, because people are feeling disconnected from local government and their process. So I'll leave it at that. I think we've got some good information to start with, but I think we have to look at a little bit more of the public contact. Thank you.
Yeah, but not you, but I got your name. Director Deck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I became aware of the cynicism and lack of trust in sort of the democratic process when I was campaigning, and so I am really for finding and keeping all the avenues of public input that we can have, and in order we can keep people informed and involved. So that's my stance on public hearings.
Ms. Gerald?
Yeah, Madam Chair, did you want me to go through the piece on public hearing? I really just talked about the referrals policy and the procedures bylaw. Or should I hold?
If you'd like to, I think that might be good.
So, yeah, so the third recommendation in the report was that the committee consider a standing resolution, and I'll just read it into the record, that the hearing be held electronically unless the CVRD is unable to host the hearing electronically, or the director for the electoral area that's the subject of the hearing specifically requests that the hearing be held in person. That all directors be invited to attend the public hearing, that the public hearing be delegated to the director for the area that is the subject of the hearing, so one delegate, and that the director for the area that's the subject of the hearing preside as chair or appoint another person to preside as chair of the public hearing, meaning if you're the delegate, you can ask somebody else to chair the hearing. And that prior to consideration by the board, the public hearing record be certified as correct by the recording secretary and director for the area that is the subject of the hearing. And so the last one there is really important because you may recall a recent board meeting where you received, I think it was 8 sets of public hearing minutes and multiple bylaws that you were asked to consider. And while I know you've all, read all of the materials in advance of the meeting, that's a lot of information to try to maintain and to have top of mind when you're considering readings of bylaws. And so the reason that happened is that there was a need to actually get signatures from multiple directors for those records. And by the time all the signatures had been received, then all the records went to the meeting, right? And so if we only need to have a signature from one director and from the recording secretary, it's also going to make, it's going to streamline the application process, and it's going to you're not going to have that situation where you have a mountain of public hearing records that you need to read at one meeting. So the recommendation and the way the resolution is worded, as I noted, is that the default would be an electronic hearing unless the director wants to have an in-person hearing. There are some challenges with having the hybrid in-person and electronic. If we're outside of this room, even this room can be somewhat challenging, as Director Morrison knows. So I think as staff would ask that it be one or the other, in-person or electronic. Obviously, the electronic at this point for on the CBRD staff side is an easier process for us to administer, costs a lot less. But there are pros and cons to it, as you all know, and so I'll leave it for you to debate.
Director McClinton, what do you think?
I think you're pretty funny. Through the chair, I actually, what you just described was what I was referring to last time as hybrid, so maybe I just wasn't using the right terminology, but at least having the option for one or the other. You know, my preference would be, you know, just, I don't know if the default is to electronic, but just having a way where the director, especially new directors, know that they can have in person, and I think that solves it. I think that's great, and streamlining that process, yeah, I think you guys are onto something, so good work. Yeah, thank you.
Director Morrison.
So I'm really interested in how we came about the idea that we delegate one director. And it's just simply because I've attended public hearings in person where all 3 delegated directors couldn't attend. So does the hearing not happen?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we had an illegal public hearing because I think I ended up chairing it. But so why wouldn't there be, especially given electronic issues, travel issues in the winter, why wouldn't you continue to have the 3 directors and have an electronic signature or something, as opposed to running the risk of somebody caught in traffic or the likes and having to cancel a public hearing?
Through you, Madam Chair. So as I noted before, you know, simplifying the certification process is one reason. Typically when, I think it's quite uncommon for all 3 delegates to not have attended a public hearing, and but it's not that uncommon for one of the 3 delegates to not attend, and it's typically not the director for that area. So I would sort of argue that if the area director, if their application is in their area, that area director will make a strong effort to be at that public hearing. I don't consider that to be a significant issue.
What about Director Morrison's idea of going back to public information before the public hearing part? Because I am really supportive of that.
So, Madam Chair, staff are also supportive of public information meetings, particularly when we're dealing with complex applications, because it provides that opportunity for the applicant to present their proposal and for the public to get information, get the correct information, the facts, before perhaps coming and making submissions at a public hearing. So it can sort of make the public hearing go a little bit more smoothly if people are well informed, obviously. And that, in my view, should also occur earlier in the process, not later. And I would strenuously ask you to not have a public information meeting on the same day as a public hearing. And the reason for that is that at a public information meeting, you may gather information that requires further research. And if your public information meeting is held the same day as the public hearing, there may not be an opportunity to get answers to some of the questions that might come up at a public information meeting. And, you know, you can end up with the applicant potentially being in a tough spot or staff being in a tough spot. You may have to go back to public hearing. And so, again, if you want an efficient process, you want to have a little bit of time between those 2 events.
So from my perspective, then we're talking about the cost of holding public information meetings and hearings. And but I think I agree completely that we have become fairly disconnected with our communities. And I think, I mean, I personally think we should do more public information meetings, and then I would be fine with electronic public hearings if we had a public information meeting in person where people can actually meet with their neighbors and have a conversation about what's being proposed. Yeah, that's my opinion. Director Martman, what's yours?
I think we're hovering around the topic of having the public have a voice. And from my perspective, it's difficult for that to happen right now. And I have this current issue in my area, and we're going to public information meeting. And it's confusing because it's not just public information meetings, it's not just public hearing, it's the whole package about how do you have a voice when you come and speak in the gallery. How is that recorded or not recorded? If you come and you write an email and it gets put in a package and delivered to us and becomes a new business item, does that change the voice of that individual? And so are there other avenues that I haven't learned yet, that all our citizens can say, you know, I know the process. To me, the public hearing is sort of the ultimate of all those pieces, but all those other ones somehow have to fit into this puzzle. And so, if we are robust in all of them, then perhaps what you're suggesting is works. But if we're not robust in giving an avenue for a voice with the other ones, or the public isn't aware of them, or then they come in late to a situation, then we're all just focusing in on this public hearing and walking away feeling frustrated, I guess. And so my challenge is, how do we as a board give direction? How do we work with staff to say, yeah, the ideas here is right, but this is a piece of a much bigger puzzle. I don't know if there's a question in there.
Through you, Madam Chair, I wanted to note that in the the service enhancement plan, there is a section under public process, and the first item there is review public notification and input processes, and I've identified Q3 for that work. I don't think that you're going to be able to come to a decision today necessarily on how you want to deal with public notification and input as a whole. So staff would be, happy to come back with more information on the particular topic, and perhaps it needs to be in a workshop type setting where you can explore some different options and avenues for public input and democracy within the CBRD.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. Yeah. I have some issues about the delegation of minor variances and the notion of the 20%. And I concur with the public input period that we don't have clear enough guidelines. We won't have clear enough guidelines and criteria and so forth until we have the modernized official community plan. So I would not like to see things being delegated at this point, because I think it's a useful exercise to look at where we're at. And I think the signs are a good example of that. We know we need to revamp the whole sign policy or bylaw or whatever it is, and yeah, so I think until we do that, it doesn't make really much sense to delegate. Yeah, so I guess, other comments? Director Atkin.
Yeah, I guess if we could look at what types of variances, or, because I kind of disagree with the sign part. I think they come here and you have to write a whole report and everything because we don't have a good bylaw. And I don't see errors happening, or not errors, but poor design happening. But on other variances, I think, well, sorry, I'll take that back. You can have your sign one.
I think it was in Mill Bay that we had that big issue.
Yeah. I'm just thinking because there has been, some of the sign things have taken a long time. you know, they're business people starting a new business, and then there's a lot of paperwork and a lot of things that have to happen before they get the variance for their sign, because our sign bylaw doesn't cover things from far away. So we do have like a lot of highway signage and all, like businesses along the highway. But anyway, my greater concern is the variances that we talked about earlier. And I agree on the public information sessions happening before a hearing. I think that's really good. And if we have to say, sorry, we have to postpone the hearing, that could happen. But I think to expect people to go out twice is a lot. They think they've already gone out for the public information, but their names are not really recorded. It's not counted as any kind of input. And so they've already gone out once. And so to expect them to leave their house or log in again, I think is an added extra step that we shouldn't put onto the public. But I would really, I really feel uncomfortable with any further variance delegation.
Director Morrison?
So, through you, the challenge that I'm having is that staff are giving us the most constructive suggestions that they can to streamline and expedite in a crisis. And I completely agree that the modernized OCP and the getting set in stone how we want our processes to roll out makes a whole bunch of sense. But for the purposes of what we're trying to get done now is we're trying to increase supply so that people have a place to live, so that people can come and work here and start businesses. So as much as I don't want to see this enshrined in a permanent bylaw at this moment, while there's still more work to be done, I'd be supportive of the delegation on 20% on variances for a period of time until we've adopted our modernized official community plan, and we've done that work. We're in a crisis. We got to get applications through this organization, and you know, I'm going to speak plainly. When stuff comes to this board, it gets delayed. Plain and simple. So, you know, anything that we can do to ensure that we can move applications through the process so that work can be done, so that housing can be built, that's what I think we should be focusing on right now. So as much as I don't want to see that enshrined, I think that we need to, you know, think about what we can do to alleviate some of the crises that we're dealing with. Thank you.
Director McClinton.
Yeah, through the chair, thank you. I just kind of want to follow up on that. I didn't think that this was going to be a contentious piece of this. I mean, I am just fully in favor of the delegation of minor variances. It's, I mean, we have some very competent staff that, you know, if they get the sniff of anything contentious, they're going to bring it to us. And I think this is a way to move forward. I just want to go with one little anecdote. I've only been sitting at this table for a short period of time, but a fellow in my community called me up. He's got a garage. He's got the permit to add onto the garage, but the original garage is, the setback is 3 feet out. He's got to wait 9 months, and he didn't know where to send it to, so he sent it to whatever the 3 variance people that meet, and he's sitting waiting to get, you know, approval so that his wall can be straight. I mean, these are some pretty common sense things that the staff could just expedite and let people get on with their lives. I would be very disappointed if we didn't see that part of this move forward. I think it's incredibly important and empowers our staff. That's my thoughts.
Other comments? Well, I do have a real problem with the variances. Some of them, maybe they would help expedite, but I think things like the parcel coverage of no more than 10% or 100 meters squared, I mean, that's a very arbitrary thing, and it really makes a huge difference how large your lot is of your parcel. So and we all know that impermeable surfaces impact watersheds hugely, and we don't have good guidelines around impermeable areas coverage on a watershed basis. So 10% is generally what you think about that you don't want to exceed in a watershed or a sub-basin. And here we are defaulting to a lot situation, and now we're talking about 10%, which variances, which could be huge. And, like the decision-making aspect of how we do business here can hurt the environment fairly significantly without us really understanding what's going on. And so I think we have to be very careful about this, and I would feel more comfortable when we have our modernized OCP, because we know that our current rules don't protect the environment adequately. And so development is fine, and I get the affordable housing crisis, or the housing crisis in general, but it shouldn't be at the expense of protecting the environment. I don't think that's what we're here to do. So I am not comfortable with that. Yeah, this is really hard to, because everything's all in one thing. So how can we deal with the things that we can agree on?
Yeah,
and
Madam-
get that passed, and then...
Madam Chair, so there were, I think there are 6 different types of variances that are listed in the bylaw. It's page 4 of the attachment. And so as an option, if you wanted to proceed with some delegation of development variance permit authority, you could pick the items that you agree on, that you are comfortable with advancing or delegating, and remove the ones that you're not comfortable with. And so the first is the variance to setback from buildings or structures to a parcel line, which would result in a reduction of the setback of no more than 20%. Then it's proposed variance to the setback from buildings or structures to a stream. And stream does include lake, so that's clear. 20%. Height of buildings or structures, 10%. Parcel coverage for buildings and structures, 10% or 100 square meters, whichever's less. 20% for a landscape buffer or screen, and 20% for required off-street parking. So those are the 6 that are put forward, and I want to also add that, staff are fairly neutral on this particular topic. The intent here is really to try to streamline your work and and also to help, as Director Morrison noted, expedite some of the housing supply in the region.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Director Atkin?
Well, so I guess we're making a decision in order to streamline, but like how many applications are we talking about? Because we haven't seen a lot in Area B, but I can give an example of a variance that came here when I was a new director, and it was suggested to be fine, and a lot of it was, there's a deck, so that should just be included as a closed area, and it's on the lake, and it just has a huge amount of hardscape, and we gave these I didn't even know I could send it to the APC. And so we had, there's a lot of hardscape, and it's completely out of character. It has small retaining walls and poor foreshore that we could have fixed in the whole process. And it's not in character of the neighborhood. The little lot next door is like a little log cabin, and it's just a huge opportunity that was lost. And so I think, like, I know I keep harping about the on the lake kind of thing, but also for the Coxsila, somehow if we could just at least those kind of things can't be fixed, and we're not trying to streamline construction on Shawnigan Lake. We want to do it right.
Yeah. Director Martman?
So I guess I'm a little confused, because when I read the report, it seems that there is the out, or the opportunity, not the out so much, that that the director of the area can take it and move it without it going through the automatic or referral. So that option's up front. You can, as a director, you can do that. So I think that's one of the things. And I read further that staff are recommending guidelines for consideration what constitutes a minor variance. And one of the things is adverse impacts to natural environment, ecosystems, or biodiversity. So, I think staff is saying, yeah, we know that there's going to be things that are going to be of concern, and the area director can pull it if he sees it. And we also should develop guidelines further to say, staff will maybe have a little bit more direction on what the directors are maybe looking for in the future too. I think that's what I read here. So it's not like it's going to go without having the lens of an area director first before referral.
I feel that I have to respond to this because I understand that, but there's two points. First, you have to know that there are applications happening. And then secondly, a lot of our current rules, at least in my area, are way out of whack as far as protecting the environment. So if you are starting from those rules as a baseline, until we fix those rules, I am very uncomfortable. And I think lot coverage is one of those rules. We're talking like small lots, 20, 30% lot coverage. And like 10% is a huge amount to vary. So that's my concern. And
Right.
once the rules are modernized, I'm all for delegation.
I guess I'd like to just refer to staff because I hear you saying that you're not sure that things would get referred to the director for this, and how would you ensure that happens?
Madam Chair, so we would go through the same process that we're going through now. And I think that also there needs to be a corresponding update to the referrals policy to deal with minor development variance permits that might be delegated, right? Because that's a bit of a gap right now, obviously, because it hasn't happened in the bylaw. So that's not addressed in the policy. But I wanted to just to say that, if parcel coverage variances are actually, I think, fairly rare. We don't really get that many of them. So if that's something that you're not comfortable having in a delegation provision, then it doesn't need to be here, right? And none of these need to be here. And really, you should be comfortable if you're considering delegating your authority, right? As I said, it really, the intent is to try to streamline some of the work. I mean, sometimes you're getting applications before you that are, it's like we're talking a 10 or 20 centimeter variance, right? And we don't, it's a lot of time that goes into preparing a report for a variance that's less than a ruler width.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to have Director Wilson, and then we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of good words here. Streamline is one of them, and I think this is obviously not being streamlined here. But one of the points that was brought up here was by Director Morrison, which is actually very pertinent to what's going on here. Things slow down, I think, and this is paraphrasing, things slow down when they're brought to the board. And this is a prime example of that right now, because to be quite honest, I understand the concerns that people have, but we've now got to the situation which, to me, what was a fairly straightforward proposal is so confused now that I honestly have no idea where we are. None whatsoever. And I'm sure that I hope there's others there as well. And as Ben has pointed out, that if the staff feel that there is a contentious issue, they will bring it to the director at the time. They're very good. They've always brought stuff to me. Mr. Tippett right behind you and right over there. They've always brought stuff to me and said, look, this is coming up. What do you want to do about it? And it's great. So it's not as if it's going to be, leave it to us, we'll do it all. It's not that at all. And I hope I'm not the only one that is feeling just a little bit confused and just a little bit perplexed as to what's going on here right now. This should have been fairly straightforward. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could offer, so there are three parts to the recommendation in the staff report, dealing with, as I noted, one is with the procedures bylaw, one's with the referrals policy, and then the other is with public hearings. And so if you wanted to deal with those individually.
Yes, I think we should sever them
Yeah.
all. As a
That might help.
As a starting place, and let's start with the one that we can all agree on. Director McClinton? Sir.
I mean, I would like to move it, the recommendation as is. And if it's defeated, then let's separate it. Oh, it kills it completely? Okay. All right.
My feeling is that we were pretty comfortable with the referrals policy one, number 2. Is that correct? Would someone like to move that? And seconded. Okay. Any more discussion on the referrals policy? Yes,
I
let's
can read it if you like.
Okay.
That revisions to the development application referrals policy in accordance with the ESC report dated April 19, 2023 be accepted.
And you have the policy there in your attachment. Okay, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. So let's
I see.
let's do the public hearing, number 3. So did we come to some resolution on how we will deal with public information meetings? Or is that is still a contentious issue on this one? Director Morrison?
I think it'd be more than appropriate to look at this in a workshop setting, because I think we've had varied views on the public information meeting, the format of the public hearing. I think we should hash that out as a group and with staff's assistance.
So your idea is to refer this back for a
Sure,
workshop?
refer this item to a workshop.
With a more fulsome discussion about public input? And that's been seconded? Okay, any more discussion? All in favor? Motion's carried. Or, anyone opposed? No, Director McClinton's opposed. And then we have the bylaw itself, bylaw 4483, the procedures bylaw. I think Director McClinton would like to move it. Would anyone like to second it? It's been seconded. Does anyone like to amend it? This is where you could take out some of those variance things, or you could just say we need to refer it
Or
back
even-
and workshop it or something.
Or even just variances that are on Shawnigan Lake and the Coxsackie River.
Well, I think there was one around water bodies and stream side, was there not?
Well, I don't
Stream
wanna
is a
count, like,
comprehensive
every-
term, yes.
I don't want to count every single little ditch.
So, well, they're all important. Let me look.
Well, I don't want to increase the applications.
So you would like to,
Well,
how would
I
you suggest that?
Variances.
So if the committee would like to remove that provision from the proposed bylaw, the motion would be to amend a draft bylaw 4483 to remove 13B. I think that's the simplest.
I would say 13B and 13D.
Okay.
And renumber accordingly.
Director McClinton?
That's the correct wording.
I have a question for staff and then for one of my fellow directors. I'm just curious, how many applications do you get that would fall under these two that we're removing in a year, or just roughly?
As I noted previously, parcel coverage variances are relatively rare. Variances to stream setbacks are perhaps a bit more common. Ms. Pressman may, I'm sorry to put you on the spot. The number of applications for stream variances to a stream setback. I would say they're fairly rare as well.
perhaps, oh, it's right.
Well, I just wanted to clarify whether, what about lakes? Does this not apply to lakes?
It would,
This
yes.
applies to lakes
Yes.
as well, yeah.
Would it be possible, just a recommendation to my colleagues, to possibly just reduce that number, maybe cut it in half? Let's just give them a little bit of latitude where, you know, we just had something come to the board 2 weeks ago. No? Does that make sense, or no? That was, it was for a variance on a height, and it was like 3 inches, and yeah, it was just ridiculous that it was in front of us. So that just, excuse me, I thought it was ridiculous. So that would be my suggestion or recommendation.
So,
Ms. Gerald.
Madam Chair, I think that the two you pulled out were the variance to a stream,
Yes.
20%, and then D was variance for parcel coverage.
Yes.
10% or 100 square meters, whichever's less. So
So we just
debate
pull
on the height.
we would like to pull those two out of the bylaw and leave the rest there.
To the chair. So would we discuss it after to have it brought in, or they're just fully removed for good, or what's?
They would be fully removed until we modernized our,
Madam Chair, until such time as committee wants to review the bylaw or it's brought back by staff for consideration of further amendments. So it's your bylaw. You can amend it whenever you want to amend it.
you could bring it back anytime.
You can bring it back next week or
I mean,
next month.
you know, I respect my colleagues. I won't be supporting the motion to remove that from it. I want to give, I would be in support of possibly reducing that area. I want to give our very capable, intelligent staff some latitude when it comes to these sorts of variance permits.
Any more discussion, Director Morrison?
I think I need a little clarification, because we've heard examples of, you know, where we haven't been able to do the best thing, or we haven't been able to, you know, achieve compliance in areas. So if staff could just confirm, when we have a development variance permit request, it's a incursion into a setback, or a reduction of a setback, or to a stream side protection and enhancement area. And that's the only consideration that is the subject of the permit that's either before staff or comes to us. So we can't say, we don't like your retaining wall. We can't say the color of your garage is the wrong color, or facing in the wrong direction. It's just that aspect of the permit that's being applied for that's being considered, correct?
But through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. And I wanted to add, just so it is clear, setback to a stream wouldn't be setback within a stream side protection enhancement area, because the local government cannot exceed provincial authority. And there's a regulation that says, you know, you can't build in the stream side protection enhancement area. So there's the ability to vary into that area. Just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Yeah, thank you for that. So if I could just finish my thought, I with Director McClinton on this, I think we need to proceed and give these you know, fairly minor adjustments to staff to process. Thank you.
So just to clarify for Director Acton, so her idea that you could, if someone requested a variance, you could say yes, but you need to remove that old retaining wall that's a problem, that would not be a possibility. Is that what I understand you say?
It depends on the circumstances. So if we're talking about a setback dealing with waterfront, you're probably dealing with streamside protection enhancement area, and that's a bit different. But the authority would be there to require certain things, and yeah, it could be, there could be an environmental restoration component if it's related to the variance that's being sought. And I also wanted to add, because I didn't state it previously, if staff were to deny a variance then the applicant also has the ability to appeal that decision to the board. So they can come to this group. And that's happened before. We say no from time to time.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, and did you want to amend it?
I honestly don't know how to amend it to make it work, so unless it's, unless there's a referral part or an exemption or.
Well, the idea would be you amend the bylaw, it would take out whatever.
Draft bylaw be amended to remove 13B and 13D and renumber the bylaw accordingly.
Yeah, I thought we did that.
I don't think
Do we have a, we haven't, so are you making that motion?
Yes.
And do I have a seconder? It's been seconded. Any more discussion on the amendment, which is to remove B and D, 13B and D out of the bylaw? Is everyone clear? I'll call the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? 3 people are opposed, the motion, 4 people are opposed, the motion carried. Do you need the names of people opposed? Okay. So on the revised bylaw, on the amended bylaw, I mean, any more discussion? And then I'm going to call a question. All in favor? Oh.
I think point of order. I only saw 3 hands go up in favor. Can you just get clarity on that? Sorry, my microphone isn't on.
Yep, we can.
I just missed that. So I apologize.
Those people who are in favor?
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4,
To
5.
remove it, thank you.
So now we're on to the amended bylaw. Would you like to read that, Ms. Mohan?
Okay, let me give this a try.
So we're just doing with one.
Yeah, so that'd be recommended to the board that, that the amended bylaw,
Just CVRD bylaw number 4483.
as amended?
As amended.
Okay, yeah, so that CVRD bylaw number 4483, as amended, Development Application Procedures bylaw 2023, be forwarded to the board for consideration of 3 readings and adoption.
Okay, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Well, that was hard. I think we need 5-minute break. That's a good one. Oh, welcome back. Okay, we got a boogie here because we got still quite a few agenda items to do. And we're on to
R6.
R6.
R6 is a report from Community Planning Division regarding the referral of bylaw number 530 from Islands Trust.
Mr. Tippett, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope this is a fairly straightforward report. It's a referral from Islands Trust. It's actually a follow-up to a referral that the committee dealt with last year under a different bylaw number. It was bylaw 526, and now it's mutated into bylaw 530. It's the same thing. They're adjusting their suite regulations, and my recommendation is to say that our interests are unaffected. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Tippett? Would anyone like to move the recommendation? Would we like to vote on it or discuss it? Any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
Item R7 is a report from the Utilities Division regarding amending bylaw 2790 Sentinel Ridge Sewer System Establishment.
Moved.
Any questions for Ms. Thompson? No? No questions? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, street lighting.
Yes, item R8, a report from the Utilities Division regarding Electoral Area D, street lighting service requests and requisition increase.
Moved and seconded. I have a question. Where is this street lights going? Cookside Village, okay.
Yeah, it's in the Christopher Road area.
'Cause
There's two proposed.
I remember Director Yanni DiNardo was very keen on dark skies.
Yes, this is not within the Cowichan Bay Village area.
Okay, any more discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you.
Item R9 is a report from the Utilities Division regarding a budget amendment for Honeymoon Bay Water.
Any questions for Ms. Thompson? Anyone like to move this? Director Morrison? Thank you. Seconded. Anyone like to discuss it? No? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Parks now. Boy.
Yes. Item R, I guess R10 was removed, so this is on there as R11. It's a report from the Parks and Trails Division regarding the license of use agreement with the Tube Shack, Little Beach Park in Electoral Area F, Cowichan Lake, South Scotts Falls.
Welcome, Mr. Farquhar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe park staff are on the way up, given just how quickly the committee is moving along now. But the report before you is about the recent acquisition of Little Beach in Area F through a rezoning subdivision process, and wanting to move forward to having in play for the summer a safe exit point under operation. And so the Tube Shack operator, who's been there operating out of the town Lake Cowichan for a number of years and had a relationship with the previous owner to facilitate a safe access and pickup point for tubers, is agreeable to entering into an agreement with the CVRD under similar terms. So as you note in the report before you, it would be entering into a license of use agreement with the Tube Shack seasonally for 1 year with an option to renew for a further 4 years that would provide the CVRD with somebody to operate that site, provide washroom, basically porta potties, deal with garbage issues, and basically be there daily looking after the site. And then for the remainder of the year, under the Area F Community Parks budget, our regular maintenance parks contractor would look after the site through our maintenance services agreement. So the recommendation is before you, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Farquhar
Or Ms. Soroka.
or Ms. Soroka? Director McClinton.
I have a quick comment. Mr. Farquhar, you are doing God's work. This is one of the funnest things that you can do if you're a Vancouver Islander, and I'm just so happy to see that this is going to continue on and happen. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Move the recommendation.
Have a seconder? It's seconded. Any more discussion? I have a question. When do we know, when will you know whether there's too many people using the river and causing overuse damage?
That will be something that we'll have to coordinate closely with the likes of Flynn Rod, Ministry of Environment, DFO, the town of Lake Cowichan, because this is a very, very small little location on the river that is a takeout point for all the activities that happen upstream. Beyond Little Beach, inexperienced river users really don't want to be going farther downstream than this location. But this will be something that we'll have to, I think, take a coordinated approach, involve our environmental services folks as well. It'll be more than just parks and trails. They'll be looking after one little site there in terms of the capacity of the river, in terms of use.
Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried.
We should test it out.
R12.
R12 is a report from the Parks and Trails Division regarding park reservations, community special events, and park volunteer program highlights from 2019 to 2022. It's been referred from the February 22, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting, and it's for information.
So we asked for this to be referred here. So I hope you have lots of questions and things. No questions, sorry. Okay, Director Martman, please.
Sorry, I was waiting for everybody. Thank you for the report. I think it's very informative. Think this is the one where there's not much with Area H. And I think that really helps make sure it's the right one, is it? Special events, Parks and Trails. Anyways, I think it just informs Area H that, what is going on in the other parts of the CVRD. So I find that useful, and I hope to take that to the local Parks Commission.
Anyone else? Director Morrison.
Thank you, and I finally got the right report open. So this is pretty fascinating stuff in my mind, in that it was part of the rationale for, I was thinking 3 years ago, that we supported the creation of a reservation system and staffing and the likes. But much like my colleague over there that I can't see because of my computer, it seems to be very concentrated in our major population centers and major assets. And I'm thinking back to the rationale of when this position was created, and I realize it may be a bit of a victim of our own success, but the thought was to get more people, community groups and the likes out into our parks and using our park assets. I don't see an increase in my area as well. So is there a plan moving forward to build up the numbers, distribute, maybe recommend to groups that are looking for bookings to use less busy facilities? What are you thinking around that at this point, Mr. Farquhar?
Madam Chair, through to Director Morrison, absolutely. You'll see a little bit later in the agenda, we have a report coming forward with respect to Bright Angel Park and what's happening there in terms of a park that in some ways informs as being loved to death. So certainly we have to approach on the basis of the fact we have communities across the region. We have density issues in particular communities that are seeing a greater uptake in terms of more people moving in, greater concentrations of visitors from the outside, i.e. Capital Regional District and IMO Regional District coming in. Seasonality of some of our parks as well. I'll use our Arbutus Park across the lake in Lake Cowichan, which is extremely popular through the months of July and August when the weather's really nice. Little Beach will be another perfect example of a newly added park to our system that's going to see a substantial amount of use taking place. Other parks, I think, are hidden jewels. We've heard of Stocking Creek Park in Saltaire being a park that I think some residents in Saltaire don't want to discover because they enjoy it so much in terms of its tranquility. So part of our program overall is about not only how we manage our parks, but basically providing our public opportunities to get out there and use them. Kind of like the 8 to 80 approach when you talk about active transportation. We're trying to provide a variety of activities and opportunities for the public to use and enjoy. Recognizing that some of our parks are really sort of locally served. Our playground parks, Huckleberry Park and Mill Bay, for example, a park for a neighborhood, a park for a community locally. Versus other parks that we have in our system like Bright Angel and some of our other more popular ones definitely are at a sub-regional or some would argue even at a regional level in terms of use, even though they're managed through our community parks program. I think of Cowichan Bay as another example where we've got some wonderful waterfront parks that are serving people from not just within the region and from Cowichan Bay, but from outside as well, and are really have a destination appeal. So part of our overall program in terms of the volunteer program, getting people out, being more active in their parks and giving back into their parks, combined with opportunities for special events, primarily driven by interests by nonprofit groups and societies that want to host events, everything from the Bay Days event that we've seen in the past in Area F to things like the Cobble Hill Fair run by the Shawnigan Cobble Hill Events Society in terms of the music in the park, as well as the annual Fall Fair. These opportunities are being driven not by the CVRD, but by our communities themselves. The parks and the trails are providing those opportunities, and certainly as staff, when we get multiple requests of interest in one park, we are certainly encouraging looking at opportunities at other parks to reduce the use load or in terms of events versus just the passive park user. So it's a bit of a play in terms of how we're dealing with it, but we're trying to balance, again, the use, the experience, and the capacity of the parks themselves. But they are popular, and we know the public are out there. Some of them year-round. Others, as I mentioned, have a real seasonal use to them. So, but fair points, and certainly it is what we take into consideration.
Thank you. I have Director Acton and then Director Deck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The volunteer program's been great in Area B for lots of invasive species. But the community would really like to see the Worthington Park Road end. The bushes just keep growing. The access to the lake is like the size of the doorway now. And I keep asking that park get onto this program, and I'm having a hard time getting it on there. Okay, how do I do that?
Well, Sarah Butterfield, who is filling in for Elizabeth Aikenhead, who is our Aiken, who is our Parks Volunteer Coordinator, is sitting behind me. She's hearing that, and I'm sure she'll take that to heart.
Because the community is about to do it themselves, and it would be better to have a fun event. And as for community events, which we have lots, there's two. Everything's great, but I'm going to focus on the negative side of it. The part that I'm hearing from the community, the people who are holding the events, is the application part is so daunting. And even from people who do it year after year after year. So like, how can we talk about streamlining, and it's just, it's like, are there any plans to make that easier and simpler?
Madam Chair, if anything, we want to be seeing groups applying even earlier because of the fact of the amount of information to satisfy the CVRD from a basic point of view, that being insurance, that being site requirements and access, tends to kind of come in dribbles and drabs versus all at one time. So the intention of the application is to have a thorough understanding of what it is for a group to want to come and have, in essence, exclusive use of a park or a park area or a trail to host a special event. And the range of those things can be very simple, to a group just showing up and throwing a blanket on the grass and spending a few hours, to the extent that you see events like the Cobble Hill Fair, some bike event races that we've had that have major staging areas, the amount of setup that they're looking to put in our park spaces. And so it's important for us to ensure that for the public safekeeping in terms of what we've invested in these sites, that the intentions of the use by these groups are being thoroughly vetted, that we understand the extent to which they're wanting to bring setup and use, that they're not going to impact or otherwise damage things like everything from underground sprinkler systems to wanting to drive vehicles across fields that can't accommodate them, to ensuring that the appropriate insurance and other things that we need to have in place that backstop and protect the regional district and our taxpayers are in place as well. So we would love to find a faster way, but unfortunately at this point in time it really is about ensuring that the amount of information is in front of us to make those decisions. And the fact that every event is different makes it a bit more complicated as well, because we can't have a one-stop shop form that's 2 or 3 boxes to check, because every event has different intentions on how they want to use a park space, how much stuff they want to bring in, the numbers they want to bring in, whether it's a day, whether it's 2 days. So we endeavor to facilitate and support applications and the applicants themselves, and that takes quite a bit of staff time to kind of work applicants through the process as well. But at this point in time, the things we're asking for are not indifferent from what you see other local governments asking for special events of these nature as well. but appreciate the comments, and we can certainly take a look at it. But as I said earlier, we want to encourage applications to come in even earlier versus sort of the 30-day minimum we have right now. And that might help expedite things by getting things earlier. We have more time to deal with them up front to get through all the things that are required to make sure their event can be successful.
Well, this is
Yeah.
from people who've been doing it for 30 years, but
Mhm.
every year after year. The other
Yeah.
thing that Area B is waiting for, and it's kind of too bad that, I hope you're not going to say we have to wait until the modernization, and I'm sure everybody else here is feeling this too. Got suspense here. It's the food trucks in the parks. Like, let's have some fun. How do we get that bylaw changed?
So it's more about regulations, it's more about capacity, it's more about business fairness. So if you want to start considering commercial business use in parks or commercial use on CVRD property, it's all about what's required in terms of fairness to the business community, in terms of if there's one food truck operator, there might be others. So how do we go through a fair procurement process to allow food truck vendors to have use of a particular park site that might be of interest to others? So there's a whole process as a local government that we need to go through to make sure that there's fairness out there to the business community, because we can't usurp the business community by showing favoritism to one business over another. So there's more than just, can we just flick a switch and open it up to business use for food trucks? Yeah. It applies to events as well, yes, yeah.
Director Deck.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know the people on the Bald Mountain Peninsula love Bald Mountain Park, so I'm just wondering how many other users there might be. Do you sort of track that kind of use?
We definitely are tracking use out there, and you'll see that in the next report where the visitation, but we're not tracking where they're from. That would
yeah.
require in-person surveying. We've done that in the past on occasion. We've had a park summer student. That could be something we would look at in future years, to send a roving student around to gauge where people are coming from. But we certainly know anecdotally that certain parks like Bald Mountain are attracting people from outside the local area as well.
Thank you.
Director McClinton.
Through the chair, I want to thank my Director Acton for bringing up the food trucks. We disagreed on the last point, but we're lockstep on this. I mean, you know, you go down the road to Transfer Beach and Ladysmith, and from where I live, and there's a couple food trucks there, and it's amazing. You take your family and you have a bite to eat. You know, I know we've got some baseball tournaments coming up. I think we need to start the process to see how we get food trucks for these special events. It's asked for. And just a personal example, the baseball tournament that we have, you know, there's a beer garden there. You know, a couple burritos to balance out those beers, I think would go a long way to keeping things civil. But it's just, you know, you go to a park and it's just part of summer fun. Our summers are so short. I think we should be, I mean, that's will elevate the experience for lots of the events, in my opinion. And I don't know, I guess I'll maybe ask the chair how I would get this onto agenda or discuss this so that we can change this bylaw, unless there's widespread disagreement. But.
Mr. Farquhar.
Madam Chair, it's more than just changing a bylaw. It's about the service provision. In essence, through our electoral areas program for community parks, we're a rural park service. We're not a municipal park service. But we do recognize, acknowledge that things are changing in our communities. We are seeing a continuance of expectations and desires for more municipal type services within our communities, inclusive of the scale to which our parks provide opportunities for the public. So at the end of the day, this becomes something I think the board's going to have to wrestle with in terms of what it is that you want to see as a level of service out in your parks. Because the history, and to date, it has been more of a rural park service in terms of what we have in terms of resources, what we have in terms of direction to what we provide. And if the intentions are, or the expectations are, well, I'm getting all emotional here, or the desires are, to be looking at a more municipal type service delivery, that has resource and cost implications, but it also has benefits. So I certainly welcome that further discussion with the board in terms of where the board might want to go in that direction.
Director Morrison.
That was a great segue, Mr. Farquhar, because we just finished budget, we're just starting budget and fees and charges. I don't know that we've actually had a look at what the various costs are. Clearly, these are incredibly fine parks, fully taxpayer supported. And I think that part of what we wanted to see when we had someone doing, we supported someone doing park booking was that there would be some cost recovery and the likes. You'd have to differentiate between the different types of groups and the likes, but looking at the numbers in the report, I'd like to see a little more work done on cost recovery, and is fees and charges, not necessarily bylaw, but policy, something that we will be seeing from staff soon.
Madam Chair, I'm delighted that Director Morrison brought that up because staff have already been talking about that. Because currently, we've only been charging for booked shelter use at Bright Angel Park and Glenora Trails Head.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, we do it for special events. We are not charging for special events. I think there's been an acknowledgement that the majority of special events run in our parks are through volunteer organizations. And I know that some of those organizations receive grants from the CVRD directly. So the question then becomes, how does setting up a fees and charges related to holding special events circle money through a grant going out back to the CVRD versus do we look at something that's either tiered or maybe it's a separation between a non-profit versus a commercial. So definitely it's something that is on our radar, and we'll be delighted to bring something back for consideration by the board. Not in the very near future, but in the future.
Thank you. Director Acton.
So just, I think there's two food truck issues. One for like if they were permanently there as a business, but just for the events. That's where I'm also hearing the events people want to be able to offer food. It adds to the event, and they can't even have a food truck there because there's a bylaw in the parks bylaw that you can't sell anything in the park. So that to me is a pretty easy amendment and something we could add to the application. Are you bringing in a food truck, or, you know, what do you plan to do? And then how are you going to deal with garbage, or, you know, whatever the questions are. So how could we just add a little bit of enhancement like that?
What I would suggest, Madam Chair, is we'll take that as direction from the committee to take a look at it, and then we can bring something back. Separating out between special events with the capacity to have food trucks selling food versus a commercial operation in a park, yes, which I clearly understand are totally two different things that are on the radar.
Would you like to move on to R13, the visitation summary?
If that's the pleasure of the committee.
I think that goes hand in hand, sort of.
I will turn to Ms. Mohan then.
We're moving on to the next item, may I gather?
R13.
R13. A report from the Parks and Trails Division regarding 2022 CVRD Parks and Trails Visitation Summary, which was also referred from the February 22nd, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting. And this one is also for information.
Any questions, comments from people? I always find it really interesting, the numbers, and I really think we should be tracking more all our parks, actually, and we should get a summer student out there finding out where people are from, particularly for Bright Angel, because I'm quite confident it's used by a lot of people outside the region, and from North Couch and North, and only the South people pay for it. Any comments on visitation? If not, we'll move on to the next one. Director Morrison. Or Director Morrison.
I completely agree with the chair's assessment on this, and it's not like we don't know how to do it, because we did it for regional rec. And so we've got the technology, we've got the ability. I think good data would help us make better decisions and may actually feed into a fees and charges policy. Thank you.
Well, you know, the thing that strikes me the most about visitation is that parks are really important, and this is just a subset of our parks, and I don't think we're planning well enough for parks for the kind of density that's growing in the region and to service the people that are closest to the density. So I think we really need to think carefully about how we plan for parks. And this has been, community parks have arisen, they've evolved. They've been sort of a historical evolution of what people in the communities have been able to afford and wanted, and they've kind of happened. But I think with the growth in population and the real keenness to use our parks, that we need to do a much more planned program of acquisition. Mike?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could see you were leading up to that, and I was kind of hoping it wouldn't be a pitch for more, because as you know, I love the parks. I do. I just think we're loading up the taxpayers a bit too much right now. However, nice pitch.
Well, let's go on to Bright Angel Park then, and you'll see why we need to think about this carefully.
Item R14 is a report. Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Director Martin.
You know, I think one of the things is there's linkages back into the community that aren't necessarily reflected in the reports. And that is because I sit on our College Health Network, and the last meetings we've had have revolved around children's health and some of the determinants of children's health. And one of the things that, it was voiced is, we can provide more parks, playgrounds, places for kids to be able to be engaged with themselves out in the outdoors. And so that piece, I just wanted to bring it back to this group and say that, the community sees us as being one of the leaders for that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Director Wilson.
Director Martman actually brings up a very interesting point, and I'm glad you brought it up because, growing up as we did, we were very into parks. We used to go, in fact, they were more like commando places where we were lucky to come out alive after 5 or 6 years old, and some of the things that we rode on and slid down. But interestingly enough, yes, we do need to get those children out there. But one of the things that we don't need to do, and I'm going to go back to one of the things that was talked about earlier on, we really don't need Wi-Fi extension in the parks, because that was mentioned earlier on the bits and pieces. Thank you very much. We don't need it in the parks.
All right. Let's move on to
ready to go on?
R14.
Okay, R14 is a report from the Parks and Trails Division regarding Bright Angel Park visitation review and capacity assessment.
Good afternoon. I'm Megan Walker, Parks and Trails Planner. I've been led to believe that it's supposed to be easy for me to find and bring up my own presentation. Mine seemed to come up after Mr. Convery's gone home. Voila. All right, so this is an introduction to R14, Bright Angel Park, Visitation Review and Capacity Assessment, an update and supplement to the 2018 Bright Angel Park Management Plan. As you've just reviewed, dramatic growth in park use over the past few years has been a trend throughout the CVRD and beyond, which is a great thing. However, it does have impacts on our parks and has implications for park management. The focus of this report is on Bright Angel Park and something that we've been looking at for a few years. How do we keep one of our most beloved parks from being loved beyond the point of it can sustain? The Bright Angel Park Visitation Review and Capacity Assessment was initiated in response to an objective to the board-approved 2018 Bright Angel Park Management Plan. In 2018, we could already see signs of rapidly increasing visitation, and the management plan called for further study on visitation capacity impacts to the park's natural values, infrastructure, and visitor experiences. Since 2018, rapid visitation growth has continued. We've seen an average of 19% growth in this park per year between 2015 and 2021. Visitation doubled in 4 years and then tripled in 7 years. 2022's records show that visitation appears to be remaining high even as the compounding influence of COVID-19 pandemic has subsided. We can see that growth in park bookings in particular, park shelter reservations in this park have more than doubled since, if you compare 2022 to 2019. So in short, Bright Angel Park is now the second most visited park in the CVRD system, surpassed only by the Kinsale Trestle. And the success of this park is really something to celebrate, but it is coming with some increasing impacts. The key capacity-related issues that are discussed in the assessment include environmental issues. We're seeing trail widening, soil compaction and vegetation loss, decreased wildlife refuge, increasing spread of invasive species. Parking and park access issues include full parking lots, causing some visitor frustration. We're having some overflow informal parking along the streets, which is causing neighbor frustration, and adding to uncontrolled access to the park. Decreased day use parking capacity due to longer term parking associated with events. And we're seeing an increased need for repairs and maintenance of the vehicular gravel surfaces, some things that we need to only do once a year, we're now needing to do twice a year. Visitor experience impacts include changing quality of experiences, such as reduced solitude in nature, and increasing crowding, lines, bylaw infraction, and conflicts between user groups. Operational impacts include increasing pressures on the operating and capital replacement funding model, increasing staff resources required for operations and bookings management, and increasing wear and tear on park infrastructure. And finally, that the washroom infrastructure is limited, both the well water and the septic capacity, and currently the impacts of increasing visitation are unknown. In short, the level of visitation growth and related impacts now indicate that new management measures are needed in order to support the management plan's vision of sustainable stewardship of the park's natural, cultural, and recreational values. The capacity assessment makes 16 capacity recommendations or management recommendations in total under 5 different strategy approaches. Some strategies aim at controlling visitation, such as capping the types of visitor attractions, so not adding any new attractions that would bring in new users. And that includes rescinding further consideration of an off-leash dog park, managing bookings and special events to reduce peak visitation issues, and formally discontinuing the group camping bookings. Recommended site design strategies aim to make the park more resilient to increasing use, such as assessing, resurfacing the park access road and parking lots, formalizing the overflow parking area, and implementing measures to control expanding use areas and informal access points. Recommended operational strategies include undertaking septic and well assessments so we can have a better sense of how capacity issues are affecting the washroom infrastructure. Recommended visitor education and stewardship strategies include upgrades to the park signage system, an increased park ranger presence, and ongoing support for the very important growing of partnerships and volunteer initiatives, particularly in invasive species management. Recommended monitoring and evaluation strategies include undertaking an updated visitor use survey and contracting an update to the 2012 ecological assessment so we can have a better sense of the environmental impacts of increasing visitation and gain some associated management recommendations. The capacity assessment provides a proposed implementation timeline for each recommendation. Some of the recommendations have no additional budget needs and are proposed for action in 2023, such as implementing new back bookings management practices and increasing the park ranger visits. A summary of the proposed budget implications is shown here and is in your staff report, which would be funds additional to the annual core budget for Function 281 and additional to the funding needs required per the CVRD asset management program at Bright Angel Park. So in summary, the summary recommendation before you is that it be recommended to the board that the implementation of the Bright Angel Park visitation review and capacity assessment be approved. And I'm happy to address any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Director Wilson.
Thank you, Megan. That's it's good stuff. I like Bright Angel Park. I think it's a lovely place. 2 things here. analysis, Bright Angel Park is now one of the busiest parks managed by the CVRD, second only to the Kinsale Trestle. Very busy, good stuff. And then is the only sub-regional park funded through annual contributions from 5 electoral areas, A, B, C, D, and E. What's the chances of making this a regional park and then spreading some of the costs? And you knew that was going to come, didn't you?
I would just be repeating what he's going to say, so I'll
Yeah,
just let him
let's
say it.
let's see what, because it is busy, everybody uses it, you've already told us that, so let's see if we can get some funding from somewhere else as well.
We knew Director Wilson was going to bring this question up, so we were prepared. We are also endeavoring and rolling out an update engagement of the Regional Parks and Trails Master Plan. So that will be a perfect opportunity to have that sort of consideration.
Follow up, please, Madam Chair. And going back to what the Chair mentioned earlier on about the parkland acquisition, one of the things that in that particular review that they're doing, if we could include, and I think this has been mentioned before, if we are about to or thinking about acquiring land, whether we can include what the ongoing costs of capital costs of bringing them up to the parkland standards, not just the price of the land. Thank you.
Anyone else? Director Acton.
So I think we already have a funding issue with this park, right? We don't have enough funding for it. And so I'm getting a little tired. And so the items that you just showed were the added costs. Yes, thank you. Year over year, we don't have that currently how it's budgeted, right? This would have to go to become a regional park, or something would have to happen, right? Correct? If I may, Madam Chair, as outlined in the report, the current budget would not cover off these additional costs that are in the recommendation. So it would have to be a consideration as part of the 2024 budget as a supplemental to do it. Aren't we way off? I can't remember. Well, for 2024, it'd be $10,000 over and above what we'd be looking at as an incremental increase to operate in that park. Sorry, I realize that, but when we looked at this in the South Cowichan Parks Commission, there were a lot of things that are being deferred. There's likely even more costs. There was the caretaker's home and. Yeah, those would be coming up in the future as well, but this is looking from 2024 through 2029 in terms of what it's going to take in the immediate future, dealing with the impacts in the parks, separate from the asset management program, as Walker mentioned. Yes, it's not as much as I expected. Yeah, this is dealing with the capacity issues. Separate from that would be dealing with assets in the park as well. So those would be over and above this. Yeah.
Director Wilson.
Yeah, Director Acton brings up a good point, and this goes back to what I was saying just now, that there are going to be increased costs, and it's only the 5 areas which share those costs. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so back to my point of let's make this regional, please.
I think, I'm just going to add my own comments here. I think the point here is that when we have a park and we choose to develop it, we need to think about what those costs are going to be. But not just the costs, we need to think about what the impact on the park is. And so a park management plan ought to be informing how we develop, not the other way around. Because I think we've got ourselves into a real problem with Bright Angel Park. It's been overdeveloped, and we're suffering from overuse because it's such an accessible, beautiful little park. I was thinking, I was wondering, and maybe Mr. Farquhar could remind me, this is actually a provincial park, is it not, still?
Madam Chair, we own a portion of it is owned by the regional district, but the majority of it is actually under a long-term lease with the province of British Columbia. Yes.
And what are the requirements as far as that lease goes on protecting it?
It's pretty limited, and it's really just an assignment over to the regional district to manage as a park. There's not a lot in the way of thou shalt do this and that in terms of specifics around environmental management, in terms of public access, in terms of built amenities. Because the fact we took the park over from a society that had run it for many, many years prior and had done some of the initial developments in that park going back to the 1970s. The CVRD taking it over in 2000 actually had a number of amenities that we were looking after already at that point in time, and the use that was taking place at the time. But there was not an attachment of a management plan or specific requirements for the CVRD to manage it in a certain fashion.
Okay, thank you. So, Director Morrison.
So I heard you make mention of a regional parks and trail master plan, but what I'm really kind of interested in, and given we have 5 participants who fund it now, and there might be a desire to have more participants fund it in the future, do we know what process we would have to undertake to include our municipal partners in the funding of this? That's what I'd like to know. Do we know what the process is?
Madam Chair, through the Director Morrison, we are going to be endeavoring on updating the Regional Parks Trails Master Plan. So, as I mentioned earlier, that could provide the opportunity for our regional community to identify the value of Bright Angel Park for consideration to be something more along the lines of a regional park versus a South Cowichan Park. But other than that, it's within the purview of the board in terms of how parks are funded. But this is an avenue that will provide public engagement, include our municipal partners, residents as part of that process. And so certainly as staff, we would be advocating that the updated Regional Parks Trails Master Plan provides a nice avenue for consideration of parks like Bright Angel that are currently not funded at the regional level as to whether or not they should be considered at that level. And if some members who were around a long time ago may recall, we had a few parks back prior to adoption of the Regional Parks Trails Master Plan in 2007 by the board that were funded at a local level and were actually elevated up into regional parks. One being in North Cowichan, that being Osborne Bay, which is now a regional park. The other being Sandy Pool in Area E, which is now a regional park. So there is a little bit of precedence in terms of how some of those decisions in the past have been made, and it may be timely that a park like Bright Angel falls within that consideration ultimately with the board in terms of how it's looked at in future once we get through this Regional Parks Trails Master Plan update process.
Director McClinton.
Well, I appreciate my colleagues' enthusiasm. You know, the residents in Saltaire and on Thetis Island, and I'm going to assume across the way in Area H could probably go a very long time without hearing the word regional again. You know, I don't think there's a huge appetite for folks in that area. You know, wouldn't consider that regional. So, just my thoughts.
Any other comments? Oh, Director Wilson.
Funny that he should bring that word up, because I was going to suggest to you, Brian, that you use regional recreation as your model here, because if it's done for one thing, it can be done for another thing. You know, regional parks, regional recreation, and all the rest of it, it has been split apart there. Why can't we do the same thing? We can, of course, discount Area H, G, very easily, but no, go along those lines. Let's look, if there's millions and zillions of people using this park, let them all pay for it instead of just us poor guys down in the south. Thank you very much.
Would someone like to move the recommendation? It's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion? Would you like to read the recommendation? Please.
The recommendation for this report is that it be recommended to the board that implementation of the Bright Angel Park Visitation Review and Capacity Assessment be approved.
Any more discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you very much. All right, new business item.
Yeah, so we don't have any unfinished business. The first, or the next remaining new business item is NB4 Little Beach grand opening. And I believe this was at Director Morrison's initiative.
Director Morrison.
I haven't run this by Mr. Farquhar yet, but I was going to move that it be recommended to the board that staff be directed to organize a Little Beach grand opening event in July.
Is that possible, Mr. Farquhar?
Madam Chair, thank you for asking. It is possible, but we would want to be focused on an by invitation only, because there's no parking there and it's very limited in terms of space. And it would be something that we would otherwise have to take staff resources from our volunteer program to coordinate that. But we could certainly look at a date in July by invitation only, working with the director for the area in particular about an invitation list.
Is that satisfactory, Director Morrison?
Isn't that what I said?
Do I have a seconder? Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. All right, so let's not fall apart just yet. We got a closed session to do after this, but I would just want to take a quick 5 minutes to do a quick roundtable. I just would like to hear, particularly from the new directors, any sort of thoughts or how are you doing? Is there anything that we can do to support one another to make this work better? And then from my perspective, I would really like to know what I can do to chair better. So we can go around the table and we can go start with Director Acton. And if you're not ready, then just pass.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Director Wilson.
If I could just interject here, Councillor Toporowski did teach me that in the First Nations, it's normal to go left first, as far as I recall.
You do go counterclockwise.
Counterclockwise.
Is that not what I'm doing?
I'm sorry, I thought we were going the wrong way. Yeah, all right, my mistake.
Sorry, I was trying to do it correctly.
Well, I was wondering, or this is more a question for Chair Stone, but our procedures bylaw seems like that would be something that would help with everything. That is kind of like I thought would have come with a new board.
I think that's something the governance committee is going to be looking at. We haven't got to it yet. Yeah.
Okay.
So you talk to Director
Director Martman. Was on
Martman.
the list then.
Okay.
I'll pass to Director Martman.
We need more snacks. You need more snacks? I can get them for you. I'm not really here, but I can get snacks.
I think, so 2 questions. How could you better chair and how are you doing? I think the first one, I'll take the second one first. Doing fine. I think I've had a number of directors reach out at different times and I found that very supportive. And I think it's helpful when that happens, so I appreciate when people do that. Don't do it all the time. And as the second, and the same thing I think with staff, I've been finding that when I have issues, is very quick to get the response that I need. So I have had no concerns when things come up. But I do want to give a shout out from last week because I feel like the luckiest director ever. And this was at the board level, so it speaks a little bit there. Just in terms of being able to navigate what I felt was sort of out of my depth, and the community, I think, got heard at the same time, know that there's a process in place, and we're able to sort of leave here with one thought. So just a big shout out for thanks to that happening. As for chairing, I'm finding this comfortable. I think you have a good style. The approach to move through things, I think, is a comfortable pace, and that I wouldn't change that. I think you also tend to get us back on track when we get off track sometimes too. But at the same time, I think you do give us a little leeway. Not many point of orders, so we haven't gone that far astray. So I compliment you on what you're doing. Thank you.
I'm not looking for compliments. I'm looking for
I would
things
not.
I can fix.
I'll leave that to the others.
Thank you, Director Deck.
I appreciate your style as well. Not stuffy, but we go through the agenda very well, and you pull things together when they need to be, so I can't be critical, I'm sorry. And as far as support goes, I get lots and I appreciate it. And all the staff have been marvelous, marvelous. I brag about our staff everywhere I go.
Great. Director Morrison.
I think that our pace is pretty good. I think our pace is pretty good, and I'm just going to refer to the fact that, and you've heard this before, heavy lifting's done in committee. And so it's better to go longer here than it is to rehash at the board. And I think we're sort of doing that pretty well. We're having great discussion. We've had a couple of anomalies, but I think that a little longer here is fine. It's fairly casual. I think one suggestion that I might have for you is that when we get to that like almost manic crazy where we're all kind of out of touch, that's the time for a break. That's the time for just a reset. One of the things I find is like, okay, we may be going a little off track or whatever, bringing it back. But I'm comfortable to a certain extent, and I think one of the things that we can do to help you and at all committees and board is to keep ourselves focused on what the issue is at hand or the report is at hand. It's really easy to, we hear the word park and we want to talk about everything about park, but it might be a budget thing that we're talking about. So
Yeah.
that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, anytime people think we need to take a break, just tell me. Director Wilson.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I think you're doing a very good job. And I fully acknowledge that I'm probably not the easiest person to deal with at times, and so far you've done that very well. So from that point of view, I'm quite happy with what's going on. One of the things that does bother me sometimes is the length at which people go on. We need to just cut that back a little bit. There, I've done short and sweet. Thank you.
Director Segal.
Yeah, I think you're doing a great job. But I want to go back to like when I very first started and the email that Ben got, was that last week or 2 weeks ago, from a member of the public that just commented on like the formality, the structure, the stuffiness. That just feels like the nature of Robert's rules. And I don't know if that's required, that we have to follow that format, especially in committee where it ends up being a bit more conversational anyways. If we could explore like a consensus model, or the first APC that I was a part of, we would just go around the circle once, and then the chair would summarize, and then we'd go around the circle again. And so, yeah, I'd be interested to know of different models. Because I also sometimes when like today, when things go long, there might be things that I want to contribute, but I'm just like, okay, it's really not that important. I just like want to go through with it. But if we were going through a circle and it was expected that we were all going to make our comments, I also maybe that would make it way longer. I don't know. And at the very beginning, I really appreciated you tried to find some little shortcuts, just with your like adopting the agenda quickly and. Like
they didn't let me.
I know. So I really appreciate that, though, that you're.
I would love more of a consensus model. I can tell you.
Thanks. That's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you for this opportunity to speak. And I would like to say that I get asked a lot by a lot of people, how are you enjoying the CVRD? And I answer truthfully that I'm enjoying it immensely. Every week is another learning opportunity. I learn from you around the table. I learn from staff, and we're not getting it right all the time, but it's exciting, and I like to be helpful. I think so. I like to try to help my residents, and I don't have the answers, so I turn to fellow directors, and they're very helpful, as has been mentioned by others. And I turn to staff, and the staff have been superb. As far as your own style. It's very casual, which is appreciated, but at times I think perhaps echoing Director Wilson, cutting us off and getting us on task.
I'll remember that.
And somewhere in one of the many learning opportunities, some organization, somebody said, stir things up. We're going to be quite comfortable right here. And I think it's perhaps someday we should just walk in and find our name tags elsewhere.
Oh, okay.
And because we become a bit comfortable with the. So those are my observations.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I think I'll keep it pretty quick. Yeah, I think you're definitely improving from starting. You know, this is your first time doing this, and we've talked personally about it, and I like to see the progression. Just like anything, you know, you're dedicated to the position, and I'm excited to see you just continue to improve in the role. So no specific feedback about how I do anything different. The one big thing for me, and I brought it up many times, I don't think many people at the board agree with me, but I do think these meetings should be done in the evening, or some of them in the evening, so that people that work 9 to 5 would have an opportunity to come in and sit. I believe that quite strongly. And I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yep.
So my question to you, Madam Chair, is I don't know if this is what's expected of a chair, but what I would kind of like to see in a chair is if they're checking on things that we've referred back. So you're checking with staff on some things that we're waiting on. Are they coming back? When can we expect it? So that you're kind of like kept really in the loop. So I guess I'm wondering, are you doing that? Are you keeping like a spreadsheet or something too?
I have been asking for that, and apparently it's coming. And maybe Ms. Mohan would like to speak to it.
I can answer a few of the comments. So we do keep an action list of directions. Sometimes it gets a little tricky when the direction's not formal because we track resolutions. So when the direction's informal, sometimes it's a little trickier to do that. And right now, the way that we track motions is basically on a spreadsheet, which is not very, it's not a very good way to track the workflow and to communicate out progress on things. And so we're always investigating new ways of improving the workflow with our meeting management software. And hopefully over time that will give better reporting out and better sort of tracking about where different things are that have been referred from or directed by the committee. I also just wanted to say that senior management is in a cycle that parallels the board and meets on a regular basis after like each meeting and in preparation for the next meeting. And we do spend a significant amount of time looking for continuous improvement of opportunities in terms of how the agenda is structured and the different, the different procedures, bylaws, things that we're required to do and how we can do them better. So there's active discussion always on how we can improve those things. And if the chair or any other board member has suggestions, they're welcome and we can consider them when we make those improvements. So, yeah.
Yes.
To respond to the question about tracking, we are going to be using a better system, electronic tracking. I think I've referenced this with a couple of board members. So we have a program called Cascade that we are currently going to be working with the developer on reformatting that so that we can do a little bit more sophisticated board directive tracking, and we'll be able to produce reports that are easier to read than an older version of an Excel spreadsheet. So we're just going to be working on implementing that. It will be something that will be a lot more user-friendly for committee chairs and the board chair as well.
Yeah, I'm just wondering for electoral area services, if there couldn't be sort of like by topic, sort of
by department, I'm thinking.
Well, just a bit of a summary right now that we could have for the next 6 months. You know, we've talked about, for example, today we talked about some park stuff, and so just to remind us that we've already talked about it.
Yep.
And when we can expect to see that.
So in the executive office, actually, that is one thing that Amanda has been working on, is organizing that tracking sheet. So yeah, we can share it in its current format with the understanding that it's going to have another iteration that's going to look a little bit better and be easier to use. So yeah, we can definitely work on that.
That would be great.
Okay.
Great, thank you. All right. Mrs. Mohan, we need to go to close, don't we? But we need
Yes, so we
to
have
hear
question
questions.
period first, yes. If there are any questions from the public.
Do we have any questions? That I won't be able to answer.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I'll keep it brief. One question I had was on R5, and there was a move to exclude two sections, including waterways and streams. Does that include wetlands? Would that include wetlands? Thank you.
Sorry, the answer from staff was that
What
yes,
was
it does. It does include wetlands, yes.
Thank you, Ms.
Oh,
Charles.
I'm glad staff was here to know.
That's good, thank you. The other thing that I would like to talk about for you to keep in mind when you're talking about the public hearings, but also on applications that were before you today, is how is the public input received and actioned upon? Because we don't necessarily see that reflected in the reports. There may be no change. And it's not only from us, it's from the comments that you made at the May 3rd in regard to R5. I did not necessarily see that reflected in the report today.
Right, so we need to be more transparent on that. And I don't know the answer to the question, so we will work on that when we have our workshop. So
Okay.
not just how we can get public input, but how we can be clear about how we use it.
Yes,
Yes,
thank you
thank
very
you.
much. And to do with housing, one of the effort to expedite housing is a good thing, but there's also consequences to that. And I think if you go on the Airbnb site, you'd be astounded at how many sites there are available within our region. So how do we, I'm not saying that we can't have Airbnbs, but do they need to be regulated? Because otherwise our rush to create this extra capacity may not serve the purpose that we're hoping for, that it might become a mortgage broker or benefit for the people developing them and not necessarily supplying that long-term housing that we need.
That's that short-term rental issue.
Yes.
That Director Morrison likes to talk about. And it was raised at the housing workshops that were held this week, and hopefully they are working on a solution for that.
Thank you. And if I may, I'm not sure if Mr. Evans says, I have one more question, and that reflects on the our protected environmentally sensitive areas. We've heard when there's variances into them or lands are developed with very sensitive areas, there currently is no way to permanently mark those wetland areas or streams or waters beyond what is happening at the development permit stage. And there's nothing permanent. There was a very controversial development in our area. The public came out very strongly and cited the one particular lot. And the first purchaser, within weeks of getting it, moved into the riparian areas and caused damage. My point is I don't want to blame that person. They need to be educated, and we need to have some sort of system that there's permanent markings and a way to educate beyond the developer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coffin. I promise I will take that forward when I believe we're hiring a new enforcement person who is, part of their job is going to be communication. And so I think that we need to have a plan and a discussion around priorities, and I think I personally will take forward the whole issue of riparian and wetland, because I think it is a huge problem.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I am Cliff Evans from Shawnigan Lake. How do you think you're doing at your job?
Oh, you know what? I'm having a lot of fun. Makes me have to pay attention all the time.
Well, I've been coming to these meetings for a long time, and it's nice to see all the directors working together. And I think if we keep working together, we can beat some of these situations. So thank you very much for your effort and listening to me, and so far you haven't thrown me out.
Thanks for coming.
But
Keeping us honest. All right.
So the next item is looking for a motion to go into closed session. So the motion is that the meeting be closed to the public in accordance with the Community Charter Part 4, Division 3, Section 90, with subsections noted in the agenda, which include subsection K, negotiations, F, law enforcement. Looking for that motion.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion carried. We'll take a 5-minute break and then get back and finish this up. Thanks.